Dark greetings, traveler. You have accessed the Makati archives. Within these recordings, you will find the stories the galaxy forgot. Fanfiction and podcast deep dives that live in the shadows of the saga, told fully and without compromise. Every transmission is unabridged. Nothing has been lost. Nothing has been left out. If this reaches you, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and let your voice be heard in the comments. It is what keeps the archives alive and stories coming. For those called to serve more fully, channel membership awaits, with exclusive benefits for the devoted few. Your presence here is not by accident. Now, settle in, open yourself to the Force, and let the story take you where it will. May the Force be with you, always.
Makati Productions present an original Star Wars story, Desert Storm, Part 1, True Colors, written by Blue Sunshine. Chapter 1, A Mission. Obi-Wan repeats brightly, as in, a real mission. Ben shakes his head at his Padawan and reaches out to tug on the stub of his Padawan braid. Initiate training missions are still real missions, he chides lightly, though he privately agrees with Obi-Wan. The Council had assigned them to escort initiates to Ilum 3 times now, and without fail each group patented a special scowl reserved only for Master Naasade's pleasant repetition of again. He was beginning to get suspicious looks from the Creature Masters, tempered only by the fact that their clans were so busy demonizing Master Naasade that they re-emerged from Ilum suddenly fonder of their own clan Creature Masters. But yes, a real mission. Spectacular, Obi-Wan says precisely, and Ben wonders which of Shmi's friends had introduced the word. He'd heard Anakin and Obi-Wan parroting it back and forth to each other last night over dinner. We've been assigned to investigate missing cargo, Ben relays, eyeing his Padawan, whose mood surprisingly doesn't plummet at the revelation. Most Padawans hoped for something exciting, right off the bat, and only by the time they were senior Padawans did they dream of simpler times. Then again, Obi-Wan was still somewhat petrified of stepping out of line, all too grateful that he was actually still here, and not shipped off to Bentamir. Any mission was a good mission in his mind. Except, apparently, initiate training missions. Chandrila has reported a consistent loss of medical shipments, and the depletion of supplies is beginning to strain their healthcare system. They suspect that this is not mere piracy, but a leak skimming off the top. They've asked the Jedi to discover where and by what means the shipments are being taken, and, if possible, require them, Ben says. So, we're tracking cargo, Obi-Wan supposes. We're tracking cargo, Ben nods. We're due to leave tomorrow, so be sure to pack and duly inform your instructors, Padawan. I will, Obi-Wan swears, but I need to run to the quartermasters first. I had noticed you rifling through my half of the closet. Ben lifts a brow. You don't wear any of it, Obi-Wan rolls his eyes. And I need my clothes refitted. Ben, who recalls precisely how much he did not grow prior 16, doubts that claim, but doesn't dash his Padawan's hopes of getting taller. Far more likely, Ben suspects, is that his Padawan wants to be rid of his initiate whites, if only to reassure himself that he is a Padawan, and he isn't going anywhere. Ben had taken far longer to get there, in his youth. Ben gives Obi-Wan the afternoon off, in light of their imminent departure, and himself makes his way up to the creche. The initiate-level clans all eye him suspiciously, but the younglings and their creature masters in the nursery welcome him openly, and Ben happily spends a few hours playing push-pull with a few ambitious toddlers and rocking one fussy infant after another, basking in the sheer brilliance of their existence. When he returns, Shmi has come back, streaks of engine grease across her face, and liquid coolant staining her skirts. She's also leaking happiness into the Force. Ben pauses for a moment, enjoying how bright her happiness makes her, suffusing the room. She'd been working with the mechanics for weeks before someone mentioned the fact that she was getting paid, and the chief mechanic on Deck Osk-9 showed her how to access the accounts that had been set up to her ident. She'd come back to their quarters, dropped Anakin in Ben's arms, walked into the kitchen, and promptly started crying. Not loudly, Shmi did nothing loudly, but tears streamed down her face that she quietly wiped away as she prepared tea with a Tatooine recipe. Ben had been dumbfounded, Anakin watching his mother quietly from his place in the Jedi's arms. When Shmi finished making her tea, she marched Ben into the living area, sat him down, placed a cup in his hand, sat beside him, and said, "This is tsai. Drink it." It had been spicy and milky, and had a warm flavor that lingered, alike and yet unalike the specialty Beru started offering him around his second year on Tatooine, after he'd returned from one of his sporadic and ill-advised trips off-world. She screamed at him first, of course, certain he'd gone out into the waste, and finally let himself die when he disappeared without word or warning. But then she did much as Shmi did, with the art of ritual, and sat him down and put a cup in his hands. She hadn't told him his name. She'd only told him to drink it in a tone that brooked no argument. Ben blinks quickly at the sudden ache he feels for the absence of Beru Whiteson in his life. There are so many people he misses so fiercely, and half of them he sees every day. "Obi-Wan and I will be leaving tomorrow," Ben says, edging around her in the kitchenette so that he can turn the tea kettle on while she attempts to wipe motor oil off Anakin's hands and out of his hair. "That's not coming clean," he asks helpfully, and received the flat look of a mother who is well aware of that already. "Will it be a long mission?" she inquires, continuing to rub the stains off Anakin's hands. "Hard to say," Ben replies. "We're attempting to track down a leak in a supply line." "What cargo?" she inquires, and Ben frowns at the fact that Anakin's hands are, in fact, coming clean. He tried to help Beru with Luke with that very same problem a few times, and never completely succeeded in getting the boy grease-free. How Beru had done it was beyond him. "Medical supplies. Spice, mostly, but other supplies as well," Ben replied. Shmi frowns. "What sector?" "Chandrila, though the supplies come from facilities in the Outer Rim." "Thanium sector, I believe," Ben said, the detail itching at the back of his mind. "Pirates. Inside job, I believe, though they're definitely working with a larger organization, given the sheer volume they're transporting," Ben replies, fetching Anakin a sugared slice of fruit from a jar on the counter. Shmi just sighs at the action, but doesn't scold him for it. Could be corporate espionage, or it could be a criminal syndicate, or it could be an amateur with bigger plans than they have brains. We'll find out. "Ben." Anakin reaches for the sugared fruit. "I was good. I helped Amu with the hydraulic propulsion. Fruit, please." Ben glances at Shmi, who nods, and Ben passes over the treat, which Anakin immediately crams in his mouth. "Thank you." "Anakin, no one is going to take it away," Shmi tells him. "Slow down and enjoy it, or it will be very unpleasant when you choke." "Promise." "Promise," she smiles, brushing back blonde hair that has started to curl. "Spectacular." Anakin grins, fetching the slice of sugared fruit from his cheek, and getting damp, sticky sugar all over the hands his mother just wiped clean. Factly. Ben's first glimpse of his very self-satisfied Padawan had him hiding a smile. Obi-Wan had returned from the quartermaster with a new wardrobe in the same monochromatic style as the comforter they both preferred, and it made for a striking image. His red hair and blue-green eyes stood out all the more for the black, white, and gray tunics, whereas Ben's red-gold hair seemed less striking and more complementary in his red and orange-toned tunics, for which he was grateful. His second look, however, had him flinching. The boy had brought a solid black robe, and it struck too close to some of his nightmares to see the boy's face shrouded by the dark cowl. That he apparently hit quite poorly, as his Padawan disappeared shortly, and the black robe never reappeared. The trip to Chandrila was short, and neither of them bothered to unpack. In fact, they spent most of the trip meditating and working on Obi-Wan's mental defenses, which left his Padawan irritable by the time they arrived, nursing a headache. At Chandrila, they spoke directly with the director of medical logistics, Tana, who gave them far more detailed reports as to what was missing, how long the supplies had been slipping out, in greater and greater increments, and what routes the different vessels took, yet all losing cargo, with no obvious connection. We have a reserve bulk order coming in an attempt to alleviate our shortfalls, Master Jedi, and Chandrila would be very grateful if you and your Padawan would meet up with this vessel and provide escort. Tana plead his case. It may assist or delay your investigation, but our need, I feel, is more immediate. I can only agree with your assessment, and a larger shipment is more vulnerable to this sort of trafficking. Ben agrees. We'll need a very quick ship if we're to meet her, however. The Chandrila government had been more than obliging, and Ben felt a great pang of longing for his first Padawan, who would have drooled at the sleek lines and heavy engines. "Want to bet how many parsecs I can shave off this journey?" He could hear him crowing. "Padawan, please no." Ben shakes his head, dispelling nostalgia, and Obi-Wan looks up hopefully. "Can I pilot?" Yes, Ben agrees, which puzzles the boy, though his puzzlement quickly fades beneath excitement and glee as he dashes for the cockpit. Factly. Trident Star, whatever there was to say about shipments getting suspiciously lighter mid-transport, was by no means a careless organization. The medical supply company housed several hundred refineries, laboratories, and raw pharmaceutical component stasis centers on what was possibly the most protected moon in the Thanium sector, and that was after one discounted the privately owned military blockade. Orbiting the moon were several docking stations and one massive hospital station. Approaching the blockade perimeter without authorization was a good way to get vaporized, and descent onto the planet was unfeasible. As it was, even with a diplomatic pass, several fighters escorted their vessel to a private port, wherein Ben and Obi-Wan were quarantined and given complimentary vaccinations, while their items and authorizations were processed. If the source is this well protected, you'd think they could do better with the supply transports, Ben murmured, washed blue by the ultraviolet lights of their small quarantine bay. "Is it all the same company?" Obi-Wan inquires. "Some companies subcontract transport work. Medical supplies have very specific storage and transport requirements," Ben explains. "Trident Star provides all vessels to the exact specifications required by their products. If they subcontracted, they'd risk losing product in transit, and clients tend to disapprove of receiving spoiled medications. So they provide transport, but who does the security?" Obi-Wan asks. Ben peers curiously at his Padawan, whose eyes and teeth gleam brightly under the blue lights. "Padawan, did you read the datapads I gave you?" Mostly." Obi-Wan cringes. There was a lot I didn't understand, so I had to look it up, and I got distracted by Anakin and with the quartermaster, and I sort of ran out of time." Yes. Ben remembers that phase, wherein he hid his every failing from Qui-Gon, praying it was never noticed rather than admit he couldn't keep up. "To be fair, Padawan, there is much I didn't understand," Ben says. "With time, you'll learn to sift through what you need to know, and what you can look into after you've found those details necessary to your efforts in the mission, such as who provides transport versus who provides security." Obi-Wan curls in on himself. "Yes, Master? I'm sorry. You're learning?" Ben sighs. His Padawan fidgets. Who does provide the security?" "Nova Guard. Not the most pleasant group to work with," Ben says, "but effective." Obi-Wan brow furrows, thinking. "Aren't they known for using neurotoxin-laced weaponry?" "Yes," Ben replies. "But they are also known, my young Padawan, for having a uniform that incorporates a face mask." "So you can't always tell who you're talking to," Obi-Wan says. "Precisely," Ben agrees. "There are some who might find that convenient. Like cargo-stealing thieves. Chapter 2. The vessel they were asked to accompany was a lumbering, densely shielded courier called the Xarasina, with a hold large enough to get lost in and enough medicinal product to resupply 8 major hospitals. Ben felt watched from the moment they stepped inside. His prime suspects were the load technicians, the Nova Guardsmen, or the text behind the yellow lens cameras located every 10 paces. Padawan, perhaps you could find something less conspicuous to slip on over your tunics, Ben says quietly. Obi-Wan looks up at him, brows raised, and then glances around the crowd of moving bodies working on securing all the cargo. Think the mechanics have overalls small enough to fit me? He whispers back. They should. Ben tips his head towards an alley mechanic, a species whose adult stature was just slightly shorter than Obi-Wan was now. They always need someone small enough to fit in certain pipes. If I end up in sanitation maintenance, I'm leaving my laundry on your bunk, his Padawan warns grumpily, and Ben snickers, shaking his head. Try to avoid that outcome. Now, you had best go off and be discreet while I speak to the pilot crew. Yes, Master, his Padawan nods promptly. And keep your communicator accessible. Yes, Master, his Padawan repeats. And to remember we are here to observe only. If you see something suspicious, report it to me but do not intervene. Yes, Master, Obi-Wan agrees, starting to shift impatiently. And Obi-Wan, Ben says. Yes, he asks shortly. May the Force be with you, Ben says, reaching out to tug on his Padawan short braid. Obi-Wan blinks, impatience melting off. Thank you, Master, and with you. Ben finally lets him disappear into the bustle, trying to get a sense of who around them pays attention to his Padawan as he sneaks off. Ben can still feel his own skin itching for being watched, but the Force whispers of no danger to Obi-Wan. One of the advantages of Padawans, of course, was that the galaxy was constantly underestimating them. Factually, Obi-Wan does find an overall uniform that fits, though it pinches uncomfortably in certain places, and he finds a cap to shove over his head. His lightsaber he fits into a pocket on his utility belt. Once donned, the dull green uniform all but turns him invisible amidst the crew, and he does find himself being barked at by a chief engineer. On a vessel this large, not everybody knows everybody, and an additional crew hand isn't suspicious. Thankfully, he's only being tasked with doing maintenance checks on the cooling system before they hit hyperspace, and not with sanitation. The narrow service pipes are a bit tight, but basic mechanical systems are something initiates learn by the time they're 12, and he's done practical evaluations in spaces just as small. Of course, he was a bit smaller then too. How's it looking up there? Another mechanic calls, voice echoing off the durasteel plating. The coolant compressor is a little low on pressure, but everything else checks out. Obi-Wan calls back. Smack the dial with your spanner. Obi-Wan lifts a brow at the wall, but does as he's told, feeling the dull metallic clang through the bones of his hand. The needle on the dial shifts. All good. Every time, the other mechanic laughs back. Now shimmy on out. We're hitting hyperspace soon, and that's not where you want to be. No, it's not, Obi-Wan mutters, shuffling back down the service pipe and squeezing out the access hatch, someone helpfully pulling on his boots as he does. There you are. Oh hey, you're just a youngin'. First service tour. The mechanic asks, a gray-skinned Twi'lek in dull green overalls. I'm older than I look, Obi-Wan says defensively. Not by much, I reckon, the Twi'lek retorts. No shame in starting young. Everybody's gotta eat. He shrugs. Plus, you fit in the tricky places. He grins, and Obi-Wan finds himself grinning back. There, is that, the Padawan agrees. A Makuruk. Mac to most. The Twi'lek held out his hand, helping Obi-Wan to his feet. Obi-Wan replies, as the ship jolts into hyperspace. Mac frowns at the nearest yellow lens camera. They cut that close. We just got told to pull everyone out of the walls, he mutters darkly. Well, thanks for getting me out then, Obi-Wan says, crouching down to refit the access panel. Being in the walls when the ship jumped to hyperspace was a good way to get electrocuted during the power surge. They're in a hurry, I guess. Chandrila really needs these medical supplies. Still, no reason to cook the crew getting there, Mac mutters. Had a friend of mine get caught that way. Permanent scarring in his leku. Never worked shipboard again. He glances down at Obi-Wan and sighs. Sorry. Hazard of the job. He shrugs. Right? Obi-Wan nods. So, now what? Now we track down some rations and wait for something to break. Mac flashes another knowing grin. Does that happen often? Ship this big. Something's always breaking. Service droids can fix the fiddly stuff, but we certainly earn our paychecks. Especially on these medical supply ships, given all the extra equipment and modifications. Obi-Wan huffs. Good to know? You'll learn quick. Mac slaps his shoulder, steering him around the next corner. I really don't, Obi-Wan mutters. Factily. Ben, once he's made himself known to the captain, the pilot crew, and the lead security officer, argues with the technician for half an hour before being allowed to download all the manifests and personnel rosters. Datapad in hand, he walks the decks of the ship, turning a different direction each time, studying the data and feeling his way around the vessel, waiting for any prompts or warnings from the Force. He is also counting crew, counting Nova Guards, counting crates, discreetly ensuring that those crates do in fact contain what they are labeled to contain. It has occurred to him that Trident Star could be creating the leak artificially, reporting that product was lost in shipment when in fact it never left the supply station. It would be a lucrative racket, as Chandrila had to pay more for the reserve supplies than the regular shipments. Long term, however, it was a good way for Trident Star to lose a major contract, and therefore unlikely, but Ben checked, just in case. Not everyone considered things long term, and few did so as well as he did, given his unique perspective. He received the occasional report from his Padawan, simple text strings on his comms, which were more discreet. Apparently, Obi-Wan had made a friend. Apparently, things were almost guaranteed to break on the ship. Ben went back to the reports he'd received from Sam Tana, hoping he had the maintenance logs. He did, and it was nothing out of the ordinary. About 1 in 5 transports had to delay for mechanical malfunctions, sometimes more than once per trip. However, about 1 in 4 of those vessels that experienced a mechanical malfunction and was forced to drop out of hyperspace also reported lost cargo. The only thing was, the stops were never in the same place and never for the same amount of time or the same malfunction. They all were along different hyperroutes on different types of vessels, with different crews, supposedly different crews, Ben thinks, eyeing the anonymous Nova Guards in their concealing uniforms. Or even, Ben considered, the blandly ordinary techs and mechanics in their dull green overalls. Even more curious were that the delays on those vessels which lost cargo were incredibly short, whereas some of the vessels which reported no losses were suspended in empty space for hours or more. But then, long delays were obvious, and not once was there a report of another vessel, of being boarded. The cargo was there, and when it arrived in Chandrila, it wasn't. Curious, Ben murmurs. Chapter 3. Padawan, how would you remove something from a ship without opening an airlock? Right parenthesis. Obi-Wan frowns at the text string cycling through his comm link, sitting in a mess of fiber optic cable as they attempted to reconfigure a malfunctioning stabilizer grid. Trash compactor. Obi-Wan texts back, before stripping more casing from the cable and threading it through the framework, where Mac took over making sure it connected to the right key. Possibly, but unless the compactor were disabled, it would destroy the product, his master sends back. Morgue. Right parenthesis. Too far from the cargo base, Obi-Wan replies. And medical transports use incinerators. Precaution. Right parenthesis. Criff. Mac jerks, shaking out his fingers. Hit the wrong key. Fried the wire. Obi-Wan guesses. Yes, Mac grumbles. And just reset the polarity. Again? Obi-Wan sighs, abandoning the fiber optics, and moving to help Mac reset switches back into the proper order. Blue, blue, yellow, green, he asks. Blue, yellow, blue, blue, green, Mac replies, then pauses. Wait. No, that's not right. Blue, blue, green, yellow, blue. Criff, where's the droid? Little bugger zoomed off with the specs. The droid was recalled because the sensors in the ventilation tripped again, Obi-Wan says. I'll go find it. I keep telling the techs to leave the carking sensors alone. They're calibrated too sensitively. Mac snaps after him. Every criffin time they update, we get this problem, and half the crew thinks we got bugs in the walls. Obi-Wan waves a hand, acknowledging the other being's justified ire, and reaches out with his senses, trying to lean on his master's training to find the droid. To his disappointment, he can't discern between the droids, the ship, and the medical containers. Obi-Wan sighs and searches the old-fashioned way. He finds the droid at the third airlock, resealing the ventilation pipes. "Mac needs you back," Obi-Wan says. "We tripped the polarity again." The droid shrieks angrily and zooms off, Obi-Wan staring after it in bemusement, and then the Padawan frowns at the port the droid just sealed. Obi-Wan crouches down, running his fingers over the port. He glances up at the airlock. The thing is that airlock vent pipes are more like sieves, and they only open when the airlock connects to another ship to swap breathable atmosphere. But the thing is, you don't necessarily need to open the airlock to open the vents, and the droid just disabled those sensors. Obi-Wan eyes the access port. It's tiny compared to the ship's ventilation systems, which often doubled as maintenance access. Too small for even Obi-Wan to fit. He looks back along the outer wall. There are 4 identical airlocks on this side, and 4 on the opposite side. He can't fit in there, but medical-grade spice was transported in cylinders, and you could probably fit a dozen in each ventilation port when they were closed, and there were 2 ports per airlock. Airlock ventilation ports. Disabled sensors, Obi-Wan sends to his master. Quite clever, his master sends back. When you can slip away unnoticed, come find me. Right parenthesis. Provided we don't drop out of hyperspace first. Period. Obi-Wan sends back. Provided we don't drop out of hyperspace first. Right parenthesis. Factually. They do not drop out of hyperspace first, luckily. Were you able to verify that there were, in fact, supplies being shuttled into the vents? Ben asks his Padawan. 4 of the vents were packed, Obi-Wan confirms. I think it has to be a droid moving the cylinders. Anyone else would be noticed, but the service droids are just always rolling around. Agreed, which means someone is transmitting a program to the droids and wiping them afterwards. All the droids on the previous vessels were scanned, and no such outlying programming was discovered. So someone has to be on board to actually distribute the orders and cover it up, Obi-Wan says. But that's the easy part of our mission, young Padawan. Every individual on board will be quarantined upon arrival at Chandrila, to be questioned by judicial forces and possibly a Jedi. I've already been in communication to that effect. Not us, Obi-Wan asks. Probably not. Ben shakes his head. We've discovered how, but we have also been tasked to, if possible, track down where that lost product has gone, which means we need to follow the stolen cargo as it moves. But if it's just being shunted into empty space, Obi-Wan frowns. Tell me, Padawan, have you had EVA training yet? Ben smirks. Yes, Obi-Wan says, turning that frown on his master and crossing his arms pointedly. But how do we get in the other vessel? Hopefully the same way the stolen cargo does, Ben replies, amused. His Padawan really needs to learn that sometimes these things just come as they will. More often than not, the Force provides sheer dumb luck. Hopefully, his Padawan asks skeptically, voice rising an octave. Factually. That's quite a bit more than those 8 airlocks could fit, Ben comments, voice crackling slightly over the spacesuit's comlinks as he watches the cylinders drift lazily in the black. Their opportunity had come halfway through the next dawn cycle, and they had left the Xarasana the moment Obi-Wan confirmed that the vents had been opened. Obi-Wan. It's beautiful, his Padawan breathes, raspily, and Ben looks over to see him floating in repose, head tilted back to stare across the disk of stars and nearby gas clouds, glowing gold green. Ben smiles in spite of himself, and lets his Padawan enjoy the moment. It is, he agrees. If there was one thing he truly missed about Tatooine, it was the clear desert nights when you could see half the galaxy in the sky. He also remembers holding himself up in the observatory at the temple whenever he and Qui-Gon were particularly at odds, and losing himself in the dazzling expanse of luminescent star charts. The cargo bay door's pressure regulators, his Padawan says, after a few minutes. They operate on the same principle as the airlock vents, and they're much bigger. Ben has surmised as much, but he's glad his Padawan was staying focused. The Force prickles with anticipation just a moment before the ship appears out of hyperspace, and Ben lays a hand on his Padawan's suit. Hold very still, he orders. Their suits buzz as they are scanned, but Ben has wrapped the void of space around them both, and they are passed over as simple debris, even by the machines. It was a trick he learned late in the Clone Wars, and cursed himself for all the lives lost because he couldn't figure it out sooner. He and Plo Koon had gotten ceremonially drunk together when they had met up so that Ben could pass along what he had learned. Commander Wolf had joined them, and together they uttered the litany for his wolf pack, lost against the malevolence. They could have been saved if they had known then what he knew now. So many could have been saved if they knew then what he knows now. They will be, he swears to himself. The hold on the ship opens, and an automated tug retrieves the cylinders and crates while Ben moves himself and his Padawan with the Force, so as not to draw attention with their thrusters, and they drop down into the ship's artificial gravity. It's easily of a similar class as the Xerasina, though far more modified and half built of scrap. Spice frigate, Ben mutters dourly. I have a bad feeling, Obi-Wan says nervously, and Ben nods, drawing his Padawan deeper into the shadows of the ship's bay. The Force feels darker here, and prickles with warning. The doors closes and they nearly fall over when the hold repressurizes, Ben just catching his Padawan and holding him against the wall, himself holding onto a weld in the bulkhead. We do not want to be caught here, Padawan, Ben warns, watching the hatch open on the far side, and a pair of red-skinned Deveronians step out, shouting at the droids. He can see the hilt of a laser whip on one's hip, and grits his teeth. Into the vents, he orders. Master, you won't fit, Obi-Wan hisses, pulling off his helmet. You will, Ben replies sharply, but Obi-Wan glares back at him defiantly. Padawan. He softens his voice. I can't hide myself, but you must go. I can't rescue you if you get caught, Obi-Wan hisses tensely, upset. Oh, Obi-Wan, I have every faith. But I won't get caught, Ben promises the boy, who clings nonetheless, afraid of being left alone. Now, Vince, work your way towards the control systems. We need to find out where this ship is headed, and, preferably, who it belongs to. Fine, Obi-Wan growls, shedding the EVA suit, which was too bulky to lend itself to stealth. His master takes it, gaze skimming the edges of the hold for a place to stash them. Bant is going to kill me, he mutters sullenly. She'll have no reason to so long as you stay hidden, and don't do anything rash, Ben says, ruffling Obi-Wan's hair and immediately regretting it when he feels the slick glide of mechanical grease. Weren't you wearing a cap? He mutters, wiping his hand off on his tunics. Lost it somewhere. Obi-Wan shrugs. You're the one who sent me off to play mechanic. Right? Ben sighs, and he and his Padawan slink along the bulkhead, Ben using the Force to silently pry off the nearest access hatch. Obi-Wan gives him another seeking look before he crawls inside, trepidation wafting off of him in the Force. Ben tries to soothe it over with reassurance, but then his Padawan ducks out of sight, and Ben has to fix the panel back in place and find somewhere to stash their EVA suits. Right? He sighs again, one eye on the Deveronians inspecting their new cargo. Chapter 4. Obi-Wan does not like it that his master is tense. The only conclusion he can draw, given that his master seems capable of absolutely everything, is that he's tense because he's worried about Obi-Wan. Which means he thinks Obi-Wan isn't capable of handling this mission. Obi-Wan bites his lip against the curl of hurt in his chest. I can't do this. I can't do this, he whispers to himself. There is no want, there is no need, he recites, there is only what must be. I must do this, he tells himself. He is a Jedi Padawan, and he isn't going to let his master down, not on their first real mission. Not ever. He's not going to let them try and send him away again. Obi-Wan tenses, freezing in place as he listens to another pair of Deveronian spacers pass through the corridor above his head. His master had told him to work his way towards the command systems, but this is a very large ship, and he's a little lost. Obi-Wan takes a deep breath and tries to settle his anxiety, focusing on opening his senses to the Force, letting it guide him. He's done this several times now, and he's certain that he's failing spectacularly, because it seems to be guiding him down rather than forward, towards the other end of the ship where, hopefully, the command systems are. He's not sure, though. This ship has been retrofitted, and he's not familiar with the design. Devaronian, probably. There's a lot of machinery down below. He can hear mechanical whirring and thumping, like a processing plant, or the textile factories on Coruscant. It's also a lot colder, uncomfortably so, as he makes his way further down, like trying to follow a whisper. Cold storage for the medical supplies. It would make sense, though Spice didn't need to be kept that cold. The main concern for Spice was keeping it in the dark, as raw Spice reacted with photons. Then again, maybe it was cold because it was cheaper not to heat this part of the ship. Still, he's grateful that he still has the overalls on over his tunics, because the durasteel plating is downright chill. Obi-Wan slips down another junction, wincing at the loud thump he makes on landing, and tenses, waiting. No one seems to notice, so he slowly keeps moving. The thrumming and drumming is getting louder, as Obi-Wan scoots along the shaft. He can't see the machines through a grate, large pillared drums with some kind of spinning chamber inside. Obi-Wan watches, and workers feed a mix of powders into the drums, which output small blocks of the synthetically blended mixture, which other workers take away. Obi-Wan keeps crawling, trying to see what's being done with the blocks, and observes the small blocks being wrapped in transparoplast and packed into larger crates. He watches one worker heave a crate up, and a Devaronian laughing as he struggles, jeering and snapping a laser whip right next to the man, without actually striking him. He flinches, and staggers under the weight of the crate. Obi-Wan feels a sick chill run down his spine as he takes a second look around the room below, not at the product, but at the workers. At the slaves. The slave takes the crate down the corridor and to an elevator, where a cart waits and stacks it on the cart, returning to the workroom. Obi-Wan pushes himself up to his hands and knees, trying to turn around, and the grate below him slips. Obi-Wan only has the time to suck in a sharp breath, and the panel gives way. He drops. Factily. Ben pauses, freezing in an alcove, when a sharp burst of panic hits him through the Force. "Oh, Padawan," he breathes, waiting, reaching out. He can feel surprise, fear, and then a surge of anger, and knows his Padawan was discovered. Then abandons stealth. "Padawan, change of plans. We're hijacking this ship," he says over the comm link, and runs, drawing his lightsaber. Factily. "I'll get right on that, Master," Obi-Wan thinks, trying to breathe. He landed on his back on the work table, with an explosion of fine powder as a stack of blocks disintegrated under his weight, all the air force from his lungs. They spasm, and gasp, and when he finally heaves in, he starts coughing, choking on the powder that clouds the air, and painted several of the slaves around him in a dull brown dust. His eyes start streaming, stinging from the cloud, and he fumbles for his lightsaber. He's yanked abruptly off the table, and a laser whip snaps the space he just evacuated. "Thanks," Obi-Wan wheezes, swallowing against the powder grit in his mouth, finally getting his saber in hand and rolling out of the way of a second attack. He ignites the cyan blade and the Devaronian sneers at him. Maybe. There's not much light in the room, and yet everything seems bright-edged. Floaty almost. That's probably not good. Obi-Wan blinks, forcing himself to focus, and halos dance off the glow of his blade. He gets shoved, and once more the dark-haired human man has saved his hide, as the whip snaps. Jedi. The Devaronian spits. "Well, almost a Jedi. The little ones don't really count." "I do too," Obi-Wan retorts, swaying. Or the room is swaying. He snaps the whip with his lightsaber, shunting aside the next strike, and the two weapons crackle where they meet. "Free me," the slave barks, voice full of command. As instinctively as Obi-Wan responds to his master, he responds now, severing the electro shackles binding the man's feet, and snapping the collar he wears with a rather blunt use of the Force. And then he ducks, the whip snapping just a hair's width from his ear, searing the side of his face. Obi-Wan hisses, turns, and lunges. The Devaronian male reels back, and Obi-Wan strikes for his weapon, severing the hilt of the whip. By the time he's turned the blade to force the Devaronian to submit, the red-skinned man has produced a blaster. Obi-Wan jerks, and a hand shoves him down, saving his life. The dark-haired man grabs the barrel of the blaster, yanking, and then slams his fist into the Devaronian's face. He crumples instantly, out cold. Obi-Wan blinks stupidly, watching the floor spin. "I don't feel so good," he mutters. "You're higher than the clouds of Bespin Jedika. Little Jedi." His savior growls, palming the Devaronian's blaster and filching his body for the transmitter to the electro collars the slaves are wearing. "Turn that off," he orders, gesturing to the lightsaber. Obi-Wan looks up at him stupidly, and then slowly fumbles for the switch. The blade winks out, and the shadows swirl, purple and blue in the absence of the bright light. Obi-Wan is only peripherally aware of the other slaves being freed and murmuring nervously amongst themselves, watching the blackness in the corners ooze until hands grip his shoulders and shake him. He looks up, startled, into golden brown eyes and a tan face, dark hair dusted with powder. "How old are you?" the man demands. 13, Obi-Wan slurs, and tries again. 13. I'm a Padawan. Obviously, he mutters. Too young. How old are you? Obi-Wan retorts. Old enough, he mutters. What's your name, Padawan? He spits the title, and Obi-Wan bristles. Obi-Wan Kenobi, Obi-Wan says, trying to ignore how the golden color of his eyes seems to be bleeding and crawling across his face. Who are you? The man hesitates, flinching. Call me Naasade. Obi-Wan giggles. I can't. That's my master's name. Not Naasade frowns deeply at that, studying Obi-Wan's face, and finally he just scowls and shakes his head. Fett, he grunts. And we need to move. Where's your master? We're hijacking the ship, Obi-Wan says, his giggles receding into weak hiccups, trying to put his lightsaber on his belt and wondering why it won't clip. Trying. Fett snatches it from his hand and shoves the lightsaber in a pocket on the utility belt. There is no clip. Haran T. Nerjatekarabal Te Jedi's, Fett mutters darkly, grabbing Obi-Wan's hand. To hell with my luck and the Jedi. Stay with me, Kenobi. Chapter 5. They are flesh and blood. They live and breath and die, Ben reminds himself, grounding his vision in the present, stopping himself from hacking into his enemies like so many senseless droids. They can't be rebuilt. Devaronians are vicious fighters, but they aren't Dooku, or Ventress, or Maul, or Grievous, or, he doesn't think about that one. They're brawlers, all of them, not soldiers, and Ben has faced far more dedicated evil. He doesn't cut them down. He doesn't have to cut them down. He disarms and downs, and, in the case of the weak-willed, simply puts them to sleep as he works his way towards the bridge of this aggravatingly large vessel, deflecting blaster fire, and gleefully shredding the laser whips with the Force, watching them spark and die with satisfaction. Master. Ben whirls, blade up to guard, and good thing too, he barely deflects the bolt, as the man with his Padawan flinched and fired on instinct. Ben gapes, lowering the blade, his heart screaming Cody, before reality catches up with him. There is no scar, and those eyes are too dark. That's not his commander, his friend. That's Jango Fett. There you are, Ben murmurs, puzzled, before his gaze drops to his Padawan, who looks unfocused at Bestin. Is he? Ben questions. Took a face full of spice. Mostly spice. Ben grimaces, knowing there were all sorts of things spice could be cut and blended with, to varying and sometimes horrific result. I see. Do you? Fett snaps. Kid fell through a vent right into the mess. He's too young. Hence, him being in the vents. Ben retorts, knowing the Mandalorian code said a child had to be 14 to face battle. The true Mandalorian code, at least. The arcane code said the child only need be 10. Mandalore. Ben presses a closed fist to the opposite side of his chest, and Fett pales. Don't, the younger man utters, jerking Obi-Wan upright when he started to sort of slides down. Ben sighs and closes the distance between them. Fett avoids his gaze, and Ben crouches down and heaves his Padawan over his shoulder, earning a yelp. Master Naasade. Obi-Wan protests, and then stills abruptly, tensing. Ben turns his head, frowning, and his Padawan retches down his back. The healers are going to kill me, Ben mutters, and Obi-Wan moans, pressing his hands to his eyes, flushed in the face. Padawan, sleep. He passes out, and Ben receives a dirty look from Jango Fett. Shall we? Ben offers, gesturing ahead. What are you doing here, Jedi? Fett demands, switching out the power pack for the blaster in his hands. He's acquired several, apparently. Tracking lost medical supplies for Chandrila. Ben replies. You. Fett jerks a hand towards his neck, expression dark and angry, and Ben focuses to make out the mark there, under chafed skin. It's a brand. A slave brand. Slave, Ben thinks, remembering Fett's ship. Since Galadrin. Ben murmurs darkly. Fett jerks, glaring at him, looking too damn familiar. The hell do you think you know about Galadrin Jedi? That we were so very neatly played, the Jedi and the true Mandalorians, and that the Death Watch laughed while we slaughtered each other, Ben replies, shifting his grip on Obi-Wan and pressing back against the bulkhead junction so he could peer out around the corner without getting shot. Were you there? Fett demands, grabbing his shoulder, blaster raised in threat. Ben looks back at him evenly. No, he replies. Fett glares back at him, studying his eyes. Why do you have no name? He asks roughly and rudely, releasing Ben and ducking around the corner, twitching a hand for all clear. Sometimes you have to give up who you think you are in order to become who you need to be, Ben replies. I walked away from one life in the hopes of making another. I couldn't do that and remain who I was, so I gave my name away. I'm not ashamed of it. Fett is quiet for a few minutes, pondering that, and they make their way through another pair of Deveronians. How the hell are you a Mandalorian Jedi? Fett finally asks. How does a farmer become the Mandalore? Ben retorts. I'm not, Fett snaps. The true Mandalorians are dead. Not all of them, Ben snaps back. And Mandalore isn't something you can just give up, Jango Fett. You're no Darmanda Huchuan. Jango swings at him, and Ben dodges, rebalancing so Obi-Wan doesn't slide off his shoulder. Shut the hell up, Fett orders darkly, turning back to the task at hand with the ease of a lifelong soldier. With the ease of a natural leader. Ben shuts up. Factually. Their hijacking of the spice freighter is rather anticlimactic. Most of the crew they took care of long before they arrived on the bridge, and the pilot was wise enough to surrender with the threat of a Jedi saber under his nose. Ben lays his Padawan down out of the way, bundling his own robe under the boy's head. Obi-Wan is sweating profusely, and he's restless even under a sleep suggestion. Ben lays his hand over his Padawan's brow and takes a moment to lend him some healing energy. They're definitely going to have to work on how to purge toxins from the body. Can you make sense of the controls? Ben asks, watching Fett frown over the consoles. Ships like this, outfits like this, were notorious for customizing their command center for the singular purpose of preventing incidents such as this. I've been here 2 fucking years. They're not that creative, Fett mutters. Ben studies the man discreetly. A solid fighter with superb training or not, Fett's been a slave on a spice freighter. He's leaner than he ought to be, dehydrated, and his pupils are blown wide. He may not be as affected as Obi-Wan, but he's got the drugs in his system as well, and there is a fine tremor running through his body. The ship lurches. Ben throws out a hand to steady himself, and Fett bounces off of the control console with a curse. The hell. An alarm starts whining, and a display panel lights up. Sensor grids. Oh, Ben mutters irritably. It appears we're under attack. What? Fett whips around. More of your GDIs. He snarls. Oh no, Ben sighs, running a hand over his beard. Pirates. Chapter 6. Boys, ahem. Assuming I am speaking to gentlemen, of course, I invite you to surrender now. A rolling, aggravatingly familiar voice called out, with all due grand presentation. Ben closed his eyes, laid a hand over his face, and groaned deeply. The Force loved his ironies. Fett shot him a look. "Ah, hello." A voice who can only be Hondo Ohnaka calls out again. "Are you listening to me? I'm being very polite." Ben coughs and gathers himself. "Yes, and your manners are most appreciated. It's just, you see, we've only just completed a coup upon this vessel ourselves." "Say what?" Hondo drawls. Okay, enough. I don't like this talking through a door. It's very poorly. I'm coming in, don't shoot me. Don't shoot us, Ben retorts. The door is forced open with a grinding screech, and the egregiously adorned figure of the Weequay pirate sweeps through the gap, wielding a cutlass in one hand and a blaster in another. Only the two of you. He seems put out. 3, Fett replies curtly, and Ben shoots him a dark look. Fett lifts a brow and shrugs. "And where is your partner hiding?" Hondo demands, his compatriots filing into the room behind him, bristling with blasters and rifles. His eyes fall off Obi-Wan, curled on the floor. "Hey, boy is sick," he shouts, alarmed, and then bends down, leaning in to peer at Ben's Padawan. "Kindly stay away from him, if you would," Ben asks softly, igniting his saber under Ohnaka's dark gray ear. The Weequay narrows his eyes, looking up the length of the blade through tinted goggles. "Jedi," he comments coolly. "Now I see how you took this great vessel with only you 3. Hondo stands carefully, the blade tip following him until he steps back, away from Obi-Wan, and Ben disengages the blade, point made. "Actually, only myself and my Padawan are Jedi." "Oh, really?" Hondo bounces on his heels and looks to Fett, who gives Ben a displeased look for the attention. "And who are you?" Ben lifts a brow and shrugs. Recently freed and going to stay that way, Fett replies flatly. Hondo rears back a little, head tipping from side to side, and stills when he sees the slave brand on Fett's neck. Good? Yes, of course." Hondo nods and whirls with flair. "There is only the matter, then, of the cargo." The non-sentient cargo, Ben and Fett retort together. Hondo Ohnaka does not deal in slaves. Hondo snaps sharply, and then shakes himself, putting his grinning smile back on his hard face. "Yes, of course, the non-sentient cargo. You see, my men and I, well, we're very interested in that, and surely it's a bit much for just you two." He wheedles. "Ask the Jedi," Jango snorts, stowing his blaster as if it made him any less dangerous. "I only want off this fucking ship." All the pirates turn to Ben, who resists the urge to frown. Behind him, Obi-Wan moans in his sleep, and Ben glances down at the boy's waxy pale face. "I've little interest in another fight today," he sighs, and then eyes both Jango and Hondo. "In fact, I think all of us can come to a mutually beneficial agreement." "Oh, Master Jedi." Hondo smiles, sweeping out the hand holding his sword. "You have my utmost attention." Factly. Obi-Wan opened his eyes and whined, head pounding, mouth tasting outright foul. "Master," he calls out. A hand takes his, and Obi-Wan shivers. "Cold," he mutters. "Did we?" Obi-Wan frowns, blinking at the pale blue ceiling. What were we doing?" "Tracking the loss of the Chandrila medical shipments. How much can you remember, Padawan?" Master Ben inquires gently, voice low, for which Obi-Wan is grateful. "Right? That? I fell, he asks. "And then, I think I need to thank someone for saving my life. Several times. Was that you?" "That was not me, Padawan." Master Naasade snickers lightly. "And I thanked him for you. Everything was really bright and it actually felt good. Really good, but also bad. I think I threw up," Obi-Wan comments, licking his chapped lips. "You did," his master replies long-sufferingly. "On me." "Oh," Obi-Wan mutters. "Sorry. What happened?" Well, after you took a face full of spice, we hijacked the frigate from the Deveronians, were attacked by pirates, made a deal with the pirates, and now we are in a Chandrila medical station. Sans their lost cargo, but with all the information they'll need to ensure there are no further issues. Judicial will prosecute the smugglers to the full extent of their authority, and the rest is not our problem. Why didn't we get the cargo back? Obi-Wan asks. I saw it. I think. Master, my head hurts. That's because you're having withdrawal symptoms. His master smooths a hand over his forehead and through his hair, and Obi-Wan leans into the comfort. And we didn't get the cargo back because there were pirates, Padawan mine, and I rather didn't want to fight them. Oh, that sounds smart. Will we get in trouble? Because pirates have the cargo. Obi-Wan asks, and then shudders. I messed up, didn't I? It's my fault, and the council will say I'm not meant to be a Padawan and... Obi-Wan. His master drops his hand and covers his mouth, leaning over to look him in the eye. Obi-Wan blinks, little white lights dancing over his master's face. No one is taking you away from me. You did not mess up. It was an accident, and it was quite fortuitous. We've successfully stopped an illegal smuggling operation, freed several dozen slaves, and neither of us is permanently injured. We may have even made a friend or two. Time will tell. So it was a good mission? Obi-Wan asks, seeking clarity and reassurance. Yes, I'd say so. Now, his master smiles. Whether we survive the healers upon our return is another story. Master, no, Obi-Wan moans, turning to bury his face in his pillow. Healer Nihila terrifies me. Inside, he basks in quiet relief at his master's promise. No one is taking you away from me. Against the pillow, he smiles. A sentiment I fully understand. His master draws, ruffling his hair before stopping abruptly. Still greasy. Obi-Wan mumbles, muffled by the pillow. Quite. Master Ben grimaces, and Obi-Wan giggles. Factly. Jango Fett steps off the transport and looks over the Coruscanti skyline with an unusual sense of trepidation. He stayed with Ohnaka and his crew for a few cycles, getting his strength back, relearning the galaxy, and doing a few jobs with them. Hondo's exaggerated personality was grating at times, but he was a surprisingly decent tactician and respectable leader. He also apparently had an iron stomach, Jango thought wryly, because no one warned Jango that their green ale could knock out a Sarlacc. All in all, he wasn't a bad friend to make, though Jango still occasionally cringed at the thought. When he'd earned back his keep, and then some, Jango parted ways, hastily avoiding Hondo's idea of a grand send-off celebration, and made his way to Galadrin with a grudge to repay. But having the governor pathetic, and weeping at his feet, begging for his life hadn't brought him any satisfaction, and Jango bit back his black fury long enough to remind himself that there would be nothing honorable in executing a man like that. All he wanted was his Biscargam, which the Huchuan had taken from his as a trophy when Jango had been his prisoner. The governor didn't have it. Jango had him spitting teeth, blood running down his face, and he didn't fucking have it. A man came for him months ago. The governor whimpered, and said to tell anyone who came looking that no one had taken it. Please? Please. No one. Naasade. What Jango didn't understand was why. Naasade had claimed his armor weeks before he found Jango on that spice frigate, and he hadn't said anything then. Instead, he parted by saying, I know who you are, Jango Fett. When you remember, you know where to find me. Sideways fucking bastard. So Fett had made his way to Coruscant, though Hells knew how he was supposed to talk to the man. Jango has the death of 6 Jedi on his hands. He'll get nowhere near the temple. Feeling peeved beyond measure, Jango drops into one of the thousands of Coruscant visitor centers and finds a hollow net terminal and a public comm channel where anyone can contact the temple. There is no directory for who resides in the temple, for security reasons, but he does manage to find where he can submit a personal entry for specific Jedi, though no doubt it will still be filtered through an AI system first. Jedi would spend all their lives on useless spam otherwise. Here's me, finding you, Derek Sir Yeshabur, he sends, and finds himself somewhere to eat that doesn't taste overprocessed and too long preserved. He leaves his own comlink signal and waits. Brown-eyed bastard, really? The reply comes back not an hour later, which is either impressive or means that Naasade gets no mail whatsoever. He also receives a date and time for the Temple Plaza and scowls at it, because he'd rather not be shot by a zealous Temple Guardian, Jedi code eschewing revenge or not. Arguing with himself, and pissed off by the time he decides, Jango goes. He wants that Beskar. He earned it. It's early in the morning cycle. Painfully early, but as a result, even the Temple Plaza is all but deserted, save the ever-present traffic lanes nearby. There are a few casual observers, nocturnal types, but it's as much privacy as anyone gets this close to the temple. As Jango approaches, keeping himself discreet and idly plotting entry and exit points, though there are admittedly few, the Temple Guardians knew what they were doing, and that building is a fortress. He can see Master Naasade and his Padawan already there. They're performing some form of open-handed kata, with slow, deliberate movements designed to stress the muscles and test the endurance. Naasade breaks away when Jango's within a reasonable distance, pausing to tell his Padawan to continue, and retrieves a parcel set off to the side, slinging it over his shoulder. Jango stops and waits for Naasade to come to him. The man is wearing light red and soft orange, Jango notices. He had been months ago as well, and Jango takes it in with new scrutiny. Colors held meanings when worn on armor, and Naasade was or used to be Mandalorian. True red was for honor, dark red for victory, but that shade perseverance. And orange was passion, was lust for life, and yellow was loyalty. That soft orange, edging in between, that was commitment. Commitment and perseverance. Very Jedi values. Very Mandalorian ones too. Jango swept an eye over his Padawan, a study of white to black, and bit his tongue. White for new beginnings, for youth, for possibility, black for justice, slate gray for remembrance, and silver was for truth mostly. But also integrity, purity, and coupled with white, innocence. Jango looked away as Naasade came to stand before him and focused on the boy's master instead. Naasade handed over the parcel, and Jango yanked it from his grip in his desire to have it back. He lifts the cover and frowns at the metal scraped raw and the new sheen of blue on the underside. He repainted it, Naasade explains, badly, so I stripped it back down to bare iron. And this, he demands, lifting a gauntlet to reveal the blue-looking underside. Cortoisis alloy. Jango twitched, head jerking up in disbelief. There was no way a Jedi had, and yet, it had the right sheen, the right look to it. Would you like me to test it? Naasade inquires, blue-green gray gaze seeming to bore into his soul. Jango thrusts the gauntlet at him in challenge. Naasade holds it out in front of himself and draws his saber, lighting it with the blade down. It strikes the alloy and gutters out, power relay temporarily overloaded. Disperses blaster bolts too. Costs a fucking ton, Jango mutters. Naasade tips his head, neither here nor there, and reaches into the bag, beneath the armor, and retrieves from it an object the Jedi have held for centuries, secured in their vaults. The darksaber? He holds it out. Jango snarls at him, recoiling. Why? Se Sera Kuair Gado di Pittit, Rooney Kuair Gado di Akin, Naasade murmurs, and Jango flinches at the unexpected poetic refrain from the tombstone of the first Mandalorian. As flowers are grown by rain, so is the soul grown by war. Naasade watches him expectantly, and Jango licks his lips, continuing, muscles tense for a fight he will not get. From suffering comes compassion, from cruelty, mercy, from violence, peace. We are not born when we come into this world. We are born when we learn who we are, and we can only learn by being tested. Adversity is the crucible, honor is the way, and enlightenment the reward. Jango finishes the ode, thinking something is lost in the meaning through translation. The words ache in his chest and his bones, for all that his people have lost of their history, of their true selves. That isn't an answer, Jango mutters, feeling cowed and angry for it. He is always angry. Why? He demands again, half pleading with the older man. Naasade sighs, and glances back at his Padawan, who hasn't faltered for lack of his master's attention. "Because you are the Mandalor, and the last true Mandalorian," he says, turning back and pinning Jango with that burning blue-green-gray gaze. "And our people need you." Part 2. In Crisis. Chapter 1. Ben steps into his quarters and startles at the sight of a Togruta sitting on the sofa, sipping tea. For a moment, he reels, trying to place them, and then recognizes Shakti. Sort of. Ben has never before seen Shakti out of traditional Jedi robes, and he's almost as embarrassed as he would be if he walked in to find her naked. In place of her robes, she is garbed in traditional Shili style, which meant a lot of tight lace leather and beadwork. Her headdress had been replaced with red-plated leather, gilded with gold, and around her neck she wore a torque of akko teeth, polished and painted blue at the bases. Red braces on her arms matched the wraps around her montrals, and she wore a belt of shining white woven fibers, mimicking the pattern of the Turu grass of her home planet. It was a shocking display from a typically reserved Jedi. "Master T," Ben almost stammered, catching her watching his play of expression with amused silver eyes. "I have been removed from the Council of Reconciliation and am currently on probation as a Jedi Master." She answers some, and only some, of his multitude of unarticulated questions, with a cool, almost playful tone. Ben startles again, appalled, wondering what could possibly warrant such severe punishment for a woman who was the embodiment of a Jedi. "Why?" he inquires, "if I may ask." She lifts her chin, defiance glittering in her eyes, the hunt sharp on her teeth, just as much a warning display as her clothing was. "Because I stood before the council and declared Shmi Skywalker to be my Padawan learner." Ben sucks in a breath, forcing himself not to give in to that first surge of rage. "And for that, they removed you from a position you well earned and called into question your capabilities as a Jedi Master." "I hardly expected them to be pleased," Shock muses. "Pleased?" Ben repeats flatly. "Shock, half your Padawans were full-fledged knights before they came to you. How dare they?" "Dare." Shock laughs. "They are the High Council of the Jedi Order. And how do you know about my learners?" Ben rolls his eyes. "You're a Shadow Master, Shakti. One learns to recognize the like." By the Clone Wars, Shakti had been even more than that. She had been the Master of Shadows, the head of the Council of Reconciliation, and held one of the permanent seats on the Jedi High Council. She had been one of the greatest training masters the Order had ever seen, and she survived Order 66, though Ben never knew how. He'd only known she survived when he heard how she died. Perhaps she accedes, though her silver gaze tells him she doesn't quite believe him. "Thank you, Ben, for your defense." She tips her head. "For what it's worth," Ben murmurs, and her lips twitch again, well aware of his unpopularity. Infamy even. "For what it's worth," she agrees humorously, and then it fades from her face. "I believe it is only a show. They are testing my resolve. It hurts, I suppose, but I can survive this pain. She frowns, anger shining through. What if it is not a test? What if they refuse my reinstatement until I agree to let her go?" "Would you let her go?" Ben inquires. "I don't know that I could leave the Order for her, Ben," Shakti says quietly, shaken. "The Jedi are my life." "Those are not your only options," Ben offers, and earns her piqued interest. It is always slightly unsettling to have the full attention of a Togruta. It reminds you that they are hunters, and they hunt worse beasts than you could ever be. Shock's torque of aquafangs are proof enough of that. "You are a Jedi worthy of everything it means to be a Jedi, Shakti. If they shun you in this temple, find another. Start a new one. Revive an old one." She leans back, surprised, and then her eyes narrow, contemplative, troubled. "You are a revolutionary, aren't you?" she murmurs without bite. "If it helps, I don't think it will come to that," Ben adds with a sly, supportive smile. "Oh," her eyes gleam. "I suppose there are other machinations of yours in the works." "You could suppose," Ben replies wittily, but he reaches out to clasp her hand. As ever, she hesitates at first, as most Jedi do, and then clasps his hand in return. "Any hints?" She inquires. Or am I and my Padawan to wait in suspense? Suspend away, I'm afraid, Ben replies airily. It's rather dependent on the efforts of others. I take that to mean it's dependent on Obi-Wan, as no one else in the temple is inclined to give you time of day, Shakti says. What's dependent on me? Obi-Wan asks nervously, stepping through the door and startling at Shakti's appearance. Don't pressure him, Ben mutters quietly. You do that enough for all of us, Shakti whispers back before turning a slightly less sharp smile on the red-haired boy. Your master's ability to escort me to lunch. If you're agreeable to changing up your schedule, she inquires. Obi-Wan hesitates, glancing between the two of them sitting on the couch, and reddens. Ben tips his gaze up and sighs, knowing exactly what thought just crossed his Padawan's mind. No, yes. I mean yes. Lunch, Obi-Wan stutters out. Do I had go. With us, Ben says. Obi-Wan narrows one eye at him and slowly nods at his direction. With you. Yes? Shakti laughs lightly to herself, one hand lifted to gracefully hide her grin. Factly. They catch Shmi in the dining hall, and she agrees to linger in order to spend time with them, fetching herself another glass of juice. Neon yellow juice, which bubbles. What is that? Obi-Wan asks. You are asking as if I would know, Shmi replies lightly, taking a sip. She is not wearing a braid, but her dark hair is pulled up in a bun, save the lock behind her ear which should be a braid and instead falls in a loose curl. She has also exchanged her simple gray dresses and mechanics' aprons for yellow and white tunics with red-brown leggings. Like Shakti, her defiance is quiet, but obvious for all to see. Anakin runs around the table to Obi-Wan and lifts his hands, and the Padawan obliges him without thinking, pulling the probably 4-year-old into his lap. Shmi wasn't certain of the day Anakin was born, and slaves deliberately did not track a young child's age. Padawan law said a child followed the mother until it was 5 years old, unless the mother died. Slave children, therefore, took a very long time to reach 5 standard. But you're drinking it, Obi-Wan points out, stealing a berry off his master's tray and giving it to Anakin, who grinned in delight and blinked innocently back at Ben's suspicious glance. It was recommended to me, Shmi replies, smile playing on her lips in spite of the less than friendly looks they were receiving. If Jedi thought a lifelong slave would be cowed by a cold shoulder, they had much to learn of perseverance. The looks Shakti received were of a very different sort: surprise, at first, as always, and then confusion, followed by anger or uncertainty. It is one thing to disdain and be resentful of a stranger taking a place they feel she does not deserve, and another to acknowledge a renowned and well-respected Jedi Master to be breaking from the mold. Ben himself was receiving a renewal of dirty looks, as if this were his fault simply by association. As ever, he smiled pleasantly back at the worst offenders until they looked away. Mace Windu was grinding his teeth so hard he wouldn't even look at Ben, or Shakti. But perhaps that is not all to do with shock. The Jedi had woken this morning to the pervasive sense that something was not right, and that was not the result of one or two out-of-the-norm Jedi Masters. There is a soft tug in the Force, and everyone in the dining hall looks up as a knight wearing the tabard of a council attendant runs into the room. They pause just inside the doorway and catch their breath. Attention, your attention, please. They call out, voice smooth and clear and carrying well. Even the initiates at the tables are silent. 3 hours ago, Ruler 4 experienced a cataclysmic seismic event, the knight announces into the hush. We have 90 hours to evacuate 80,000 refugees, and it's a 6-hour journey there. All knights and senior Padawans report to the flight bays for immediate assignment to assist in the evacuation. All junior Padawans report to the Quartermaster's division to assist in logistics supply. All masters, please check your comms. You will be receiving individual assignments shortly. The knights scanned the room as they finished speaking, Creature-masters already preparing to rein in their initiates in order to keep the clans out of the way. 80,000. A Corellian master inquires, tacitly aware of the younger beings in attendance. He doesn't say that 80,000 people is still less than a third of the population of Ruler 4. The knight swallows tightly. A conservative estimate, they reply. But yes, just 80,000. They leave, and the Jedi start moving with economical reserve and tight focus, leaving their trays on the table and streaming from the room with quick efficiency. I would be of more use as a mechanic, Shmi says, and Shakti is already nodding. Go, the Togruta tells her. They could use your skills right now. Her eyes meet Ben's and they lock, staring at each other until their comm links finally chime, and the anticipation, the burning what do I do funny to do something finally breaking as answers were forthcoming. Shakti reads quicker. I'm to take charge of a group of senior Padawans assisting in the evacuation, she says aloud, already rising. I'm to report to the Senate and represent the petitions for assistance. Ben frowns, wondering how he received such an assignment when Adi Gallia wanted to disembowel him, if their last challenge match was any indication. I pity the senators, Shakti offers, and then slips into the throng, making her way out. Ben snorts and turns to his Padawan, who's rising from his seat, Anakin in his arms. Follow Shakti. There's an initiate clan just by the entrance. They'll look after Anakin. On it, Master, Obi-Wan replies, ducking between two knights and weaving through the throng, still small enough to slip through the press of people with ease. Ben himself must wait for the opportunity to stand to rise, and slip in where space is made for him. Chapter 2. The chief mechanic on deck lights up with relief when Shmi pushes her way through the growing mass of knights and Padawans. We need every hand we've got. If you can get it flight-worthy, it goes, they barked. Even all our transports could not take 80,000 people, Shmi replies, following in the chief's shadow as they made their way to the tool depot. The Corellian Temple is sending their fleet. They have larger transports than we do, but far fewer numbers. Half our pilots are being sent just to meet the demand, Chief replies, ordering a pair of astromechs, a service droid, and one crawler unit to stick with Shmi. Hopefully we'll receive some backup once the Senate team gets through the subcommittees, but we can't count on it and we can't wait for it. Politicians take too much criffing time. Shmi slides on an apron, takes a tool belt, and the crawler unit lifts a crate of common parts. Wait. Chief grabs her arm and points to two junior mechanics. Take them too, they need supervision still, and you're one of the best. Shmi nods and whistles for the R1 astromech unit to start scanning the vessels on the dock she's been assigned. She approached the two junior mechanics herself. Both of them look overwhelmed by the prospect of what's being asked of them today. Come with me, do as I tell you, and worry about nothing else, she tells them, calm but firm. But look at. Come with me, do as I tell you, and worry about nothing else, Shmi repeats, letting her words sink into the air, reaching out with her own certainty as she has done 100 times for new and nervous slaves who were going to get themselves hurt. Both junior mechanics blink and refocus on her. Yes, ma'am. They nod. They get to work. Factly. The call for aid came directly from Jedi to Jedi, which allowed us to respond quickly and freely. Adi Gallia, despite her status as knight, briefed the collective of masters assigned to liaise with the Senate regarding the crisis of Ruler 4. However, that also means it is our responsibility to present the matter to the Senate and champion the petitions for further response. As much as we can do as Jedi, there is still much that is beyond our capabilities, and the refugees are going to need far more support than we alone can offer. Now, there are a dozen committees and subcommittees to be informed and addressed regarding this incident. Each of you will be assigned a partner and a directive over which there will be no argument. We do not have time. She glares over the lot of them. Keep your comm links open, communicate when you have met with success, and do not promise anything to anyone that you cannot personally guarantee. Favors are a dangerous game, and the Jedi are not playing. You are all here because you are considered the most devious and stubborn masters the Order has to offer. We need the best and worst of that today. Force be with us. She'll be made a master long before her first Padawan is knighted, Ben knows, and in this moment he can see why, her presence a blazing corona around her in the Force. But all the respect in the world does not stop him from giving her the stink eye when she assigns him to Qui-Gon Jinn. Qui-Gon merely frowns pensively at the assignment, looking aloof, which could not tell Ben more clearly that he was uncomfortable. They are assigned the task of finding accommodations for all the displaced refugees and head out immediately. Would you like to start with Committee for Interspecies Relations, the Subcommittee for Displaced Persons, or the Office of Population Affairs? Qui-Gon inquires, attempting to sound polite and instead coming across as slightly condescending. To be fair, the man had been raised among an avian species prior to the Temple crash, and pride and vanity were the epitome of cultural traits of most avian species. The behavior was not meant to seem as offensive as it was. Ben mouths population affairs back to himself in bafflement, and then remembers that there were several hundred systems who petitioned the Republic for assistance in colony propagation, and several boards which existed regarding guidelines for population density and sustainment. Those he has dealt with directly, and the Office of Population Affairs must be their overseer. I would rather spin a wheel than climb up and down ladders, Ben replies cryptically, earning a frown. A frown and an irritated look. It's a very long walk, getting anywhere in the Senate building, which may as well have been his own city. Is your disagreement with me entirely due to the fact that I refused to take Obi-Wan Kenobi as my Padawan? Qui-Gon finally asks, biting the question out. Your reaction seems entirely disproportionate given that my refusal allowed the boy to become your student. Ben thinks he's finally dared to ask me directly. Ben knew from personal experience that Qui-Gon Jinn could spend years dancing around to avoid situations he found uncomfortable, though he had no compunction whatsoever about dragging out or diving into the discomfort of others. My disagreement with you, Ben starts, voice soft and cold and tempering a lifetime of bitterness, has a little to do with the manner in which you publicly and savagely humiliated a child in the course of you refusing him as your Padawan, yes. Ben inhales deeply and stops walking, turning on Qui-Gon and the empty corridor. But my real disagreement with you, as you call it, has much more to do with how you have proven utterly inept in accepting the fact that Xanadus Ducrian made his own choices. Qui-Gon reels back as if struck, and then his ice blue eyes blaze angrily. That affair is none of your business, Qui-Gon snarls, drawing himself up into a tower of rage. You think you are the only master whose Padawan fell. Ben snarls back, their stances bare inches apart and brimming with tightly contained violence. Qui-Gon scoffs, if you think pretending to understand when there is no other record. Shadows take care of their own, just as healers do, and always have done. Ben hisses viciously, cutting him off again. And believe me, Master Jinn, we fall far more often. Ben is not and was not a shadow, but the path he walked was far closer to theirs than it ever was to Qui-Gon Jinn's. All the high generals of the Guard took steps into the darker halves of themselves and the galaxy and learned things only shadows used to know. Claiming to have walked the path of shadows is just the story he has to tell to be believed. And there was a truth in that statement that so many Jedi simply did not know. Healers fell far more often than any other Jedi. They witnessed too much suffering and failure and tried so hard to save that they reached for the ability, for the power, and their desperation led them into darkness. And that was true long before the Clone Wars. Anakin's was not the only fall. His was just the one that cut the deepest and never stopped bleeding, and the whole galaxy suffered for it. Dooku, Pong Krell, Depa Billaba, Asajj Ventress, Quinlan Vos, Barriss Offis. The list went on. Some of them recovered, though never completely, and some of them. Qui-Gon sucks in through his nose and flinches a step back at that. Your own Padawan. Qui-Gon's face is ashen, his voice appalled. Ben swallows tightly, eyes burning. No, his heart reminds him that I couldn't do, and in failing to do, killed him far more cruelly than any strike of the blade, and unleashed a monster. My own Padawan, Ben says anyway, to make a point, because what is his pay next to the lessons they need to learn? My first Padawan. So if you think that his actions excuse you of your responsibilities, that your pain makes your cruelty acceptable, then you are wrong, Qui-Gon Jinn, and far closer to following him than you recognize. If I hadn't brought him to Telos. Yes, Ben agrees sharply. The Council should never have tested his loyalty by forcing him to confront his own father. But it was done, and is done. It is not for you to wallow over for the rest of time and neglect the duty you hold to this order. It was a lesson, Qui-Gon, not a life sentence. He's still out there? Qui-Gon whispers hoarsely. How can I, when he's still out there? When I still dream about the hatred I saw in his eyes for me? Do you know the greatest lie we were ever taught to believe, Jin? Ben asks, not waiting for an answer. That darkness is inescapable. Qui-Gon stares at him, stiff and looking trapped. It is a choice, and it has to be made, Ben says unequivocally, unforgivingly. And those who choose it, those who follow that path, they do not take a step and become lost forever. They make that choice, over and over again, to be cruel, to seek power, to hate and spread hatred. They make that choice every day and keep making it, and that is what makes them dark. That is what makes them evil, and that has nothing to do with you. What would you have me do? Jin growls. Forget. It was my failure that. We are not given the luxury of forgetting. Ben snaps, glowering up at the other man. Not for a single moment of a single day. But you move on. You step forward, and you choose to do better, to have compassion, to show discipline, to guide others into the light. How? Qui-Gon shakes his head, sounding defeated, and Ben has no pity, because Qui-Gon defeats himself. Take another Padawan learner, Ben says, turning and continuing through the Senate building. They have work to do, and no time for such drama. Try a girl this time, Ben suggests. Girls are strange and difficult, Qui-Gon mutters. Exactly. Ben retorts. Chapter 3. Ruler 4 was an agricultural moon in the Corellian sector. It had level land masses, massive subterranean oceans, and 3 supervolcanoes. Typically a vibrant yellow-blue swirling with clouds, they could see from the transports the mass of gray-brown swallow in the eastern hemisphere, choking out the sun, and all life below. Shakti looked to the team of senior Padawans and young knights assigned to her, all specially chosen for this assignment. 1 Miralukan and 2 Togruta knights, a Mikian Padawan, and a Solonian Padawan, rare as it was to see one of their species in the order. Each and every one came from a species with advanced capabilities of perception, honed by their Jedi training. Shakti had been mid-transport when her orders changed from supervising Padawans on the loading platforms to assembling a search and rescue team. Probation or not, someone had realized that directing traffic was a waste of her capabilities, one that they could ill afford. We'll be setting down on the very edge of the surveyor's safety zone. Keep your wits about you, and never, ever let your partner out of your sight, Shakti informs them. The first rule of rescue, she asks. Never let yourself become another victim, Knight Lisa, a fellow Togruta huntress, replies. Communicate anything you think you see, anything you think you hear, or feel, or sense, before you act. We all need to be aware of each other. If we make mistakes, we have no backup until the other teams have cleared their own search grids. Factly. Padawan Kenobi. Obi-Wan flinches at the sudden sharp recall and stops in his tracks, turning to the speaker to find Master Rancesses hailing him. Obi-Wan trots over to the Thespiation counselor. There you are? Yes. Master Rancesses nods to him, silver hair parting to reveal glimpses of his green-scaled skin. Have you been given assignment yet? No, Master, Obi-Wan replies. I was delayed and I'm still looking for Knight Tusis. Anakin had insisted he'd be able to help, and had argued that Obi-Wan should take him to his mom instead of leaving him with the Initiate clan. Obi-Wan wasn't used to having to tell Anakin no. He hadn't cried, but the betrayed look on his face hurt worse. No matter. Knight Tusis is your supervisor, I am hers. I want you to take charge of these 2 initiates. Rancesses turns, pointing to one of several pairs of older initiates. We were rather short-handed relying on junior Padawans alone. The storeroom is quite massive, after all, and this is a large undertaking. His S's trills slightly over his reptilian tongue. Yes, Master, Obi-Wan replies, hiding his uncertainty. He's a very junior Padawan himself, having been apprenticed less than a year. Master Rancesses studies him a moment, as if sensing his unease, reptilian eyes closing and opening slowly. You have assisted your master in the direction of several initiate clans on their journeys to and from Ilum, have you not? This makes you uniquely experienced, he states. Obi-Wan blinks, never having thought of it like that. Yes, master, he says more surely, and the Thespian master waves the two initiates over, a tiny Alina boy and a tan-skinned Deveronian girl, with brown and white hair. Excellent, the master says. Are your fingers quite dexterous? Master, Obi-Wan questions, puzzled. I'm assigning you and your partners to packing. The Padawans on collection duty will bring their supplies to you, and you will ensure each bundle contains what it ought to. He hands Obi-Wan a datapad, which appears from a hidden pocket on the master's draping robes. There are standardized lists for such occurrences as this, but don't hesitate to add a small thing or two. Refugees have so very little, after all. Yes, master, Obi-Wan replies, glancing at the datapad and pleased to find that it contains a map, marked with their designated duty area. Thank you. He bows. No, Padawan Kenobi, thank you. Now off with you, there's much we have yet to do. Master Rancis bows back. Obi-Wan turns to his companions. We have to go down 2 levels, he says. I'm Obi-Wan Kenobi. Initiate Sui Choi, the blue Alina boy says formally, large green eyes very wide in his face. He's perhaps half Obi-Wan size, but moves much faster than humans tended to, having no trouble at all keeping up. Chandrila, the Deveronian girl says, more subdued than her companion. Her iridescent blue eyes stray enviously to Obi-Wan's Padawan braid, and Obi-Wan notices that her tan skin is covered in a fine layer of soft orange fur. Dark circles mark her brow where a male Deveronian would have horns, and black freckles span the bridge of her cheeks and nose. Properly introduced, they weave through the somewhat scrambled groups of other Padawans, droids, and quartermaster's assistants, and make their way to the lift. Obi-Wan can hear the thunder of the textile printers all fired up, printing out simple clothes in standard sizes and massive quantities, and they pass lines of Padawans squishing down and rolling up quilts and blankets from the collection. How do you get your master to choose you? Sean asks quietly once the lift doors close between them and the noise. Sui darts a glance up, but then looks away, still listening intently. I didn't, Obi-Wan replies honestly. I'd given up, really. We weren't even properly introduced, and he just asked me. Uh-oh, Chandrila sighs, slumping a little. I tried to fight for it, Obi-Wan says, understanding exactly how she and Choi must feel. I even begged. I thought if I try harder, if I do this, if I just keep asking, but he shakes his head. None of that worked. There isn't any trick to it. It's just the will of the Force. She asks sourly. There's nothing wrong with me, she says, far more certain of herself than Obi-Wan still sometimes felt. But no night even looks my way, and I've only got a few months left. I don't know what else to do with my life, you know. Most initiates have an idea of which corps they'll go into if they aren't chosen, but nothing fits. I'm meant to be a Jedi. Yeah, Obi-Wan says, as the lift stops. They file out. They assign me to the Agricorps, and I thought, I'm not a farmer. I like plants well enough. My master has some really neat ones in our quarters, but it just wasn't right. Then why does it happen? She protests, following him closely, while Sui Choi bounces just a pace ahead of them. Don't we deserve a real chance to try? Instead of just being shipped off. We can't even go to the Almas Temple after they refuse us here, and the Almas will take older students. Just not rejected ones. It just happens, Obi-Wan sighs. You're right, and I agree with you. It isn't fair. I can't fix it for you, Sean. I'm sorry. She takes a deep breath, releasing some of her stress and attention. No, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have just thrown that at you. I understand. Obi-Wan shrugs. And it's okay if you feel mad at me. It's not personal. I just got lucky. He offers her a sympathetic look, and her luminescent blue eyes shine a bit. Yeah, she says. Thanks. But still, regardless of what happens tomorrow, she draws herself up, the Force almost shimmering in the air around her as she draws in her resolve. Like rain and sunshine, today I'm still a Jedi, and we have work to do. She bumps his shoulder companionably, and Obi-Wan nods, jostling her in return. Chapter 4. Ben inhales deeply, quelling frustration at the pantheon of aides and protocol droids and senatorial attendants that seem persistent in waylaying him and Qui-Gon, and tokes on a sudden waft of pungent rot. Qui-Gon, trying to edge around a pair of particularly corpulent Hulk, glances at him in concern. "Are you all right?" Ben, however, has forced his lungs still and thrown all his focus into his shields, into blurring his own existence until he was nearly indistinguishable as an individual, a skill perfected during the Jedi purges. His eyes scan the large indoor courtyard, full of milling delegates and representatives, and he catches a flash of familiar Nubian plum purple trimmed in Republic blue. Ben is looking right at him, and the Force whispers of nothing at all. "Master Naasade," Qui-Gon asks again, pointedly irritated at being ignored. "Too much perfume in the room," Ben murmurs, letting his gaze drift away, though all his instincts are screaming at him. "I am calm. I am not angry. I am not dangerous. I have no enemies here." He lies to himself, painting layer over layer of falsehood around his mind until it was all anyone would be able to see. Senator Palpatine turns, casting a seemingly curious glance around the room, and his gaze passes right over Ben Naasade. It lingers on Qui-Gon Jinn for a moment, and then dismisses him. The senator returns to his conversation. Several senators and ambassadors try and gain their attention, as always when a Jedi lingers in these halls, and Qui-Gon grows increasingly frustrated at the way Ben seems to seamlessly avoid unwanted conversation while he himself cannot. "Who are you looking for?" Qui-Gon growls irritably, extracting himself from another accusation. "Friendly faces." Jinn growls wordlessly. "Senator Valorum is a friend of mine. He represents Coruscant itself, and Coruscant has a dense enough population as it is," Ben says dismissively, sounding harsher than he means to. "Coruscant has resources," Jinn protests. "Tell that to those on the lower levels, which is where our refugees would end up," Ben retorts, and finally spies a flash of metallic silver, tracking it until it resolves as bracers on the arms on a young man in stately gray, with subtle adornments of the deep Alderaani royal blue. "There we are," Ben murmurs, taking in thick dark hair and a smooth shaven face, though possessed of the shadow of an easy smile. He looks different without his well-groomed goatee and the strands of silver at his temples, but his eyes possessed the same directness that Ben had always found reassuring. "That's a senator's aide, Master Naasade. He'll hold very little influence, if any," Qui-Gon mutters. "That is a member of the royal house of Alderaan, Master Jinn, and I have more interest in speaking with Alderaan's queen than with his representative." "That is not what we have been tasked to do," Jinn protests, but doesn't manage to actually lay a hand on Naasade to stop him as he eels through the crowd like a brush of wind. "Lord Organa," Ben calls softly, and the young man turns, surprised and surprised again to see a Jedi asking for him. Ben Holz lifts both his palms upwards and bows his head in the traditional Alderaani manner, and Bail repeats the gesture. "I'm not sure we've ever been introduced, Master Jedi, though if we have, I apologize for my lapse," the young man says easily, one brow slightly lifted in puzzled amusement at his own expense. "Master Ben Naasade, and my counterpart Qui-Gon Jinn," Ben introduces as the other Jedi strides up behind him in a huff. "May we speak with you? If this is about matters of the Senate, I'm afraid I don't actually hold a seat yet." "Not at all," Ben shakes his head. "I'm rather more interested in speaking directly with Alderaan, as opposed to the Senate." Bail tilts his head, intrigued, and glances around. There are several eavesdroppers, and he catches Ben's eye with the silent question. "It's not a private matter. We'll be approaching many worlds today, I'm afraid," Ben says, Qui-Gon fuming in confusion to his left. Early this morning, Ruler 4 experienced a globally catastrophic event, and the Jedi are responding to their plight at this very moment. "I would like to address Alderaan on the possibility of taking in as many as 6,000 refugees, not through any subcommittee action." Ben lifts a hand, stalling Bail's immediate response, but as a request from the Jedi order directly to the Queen of Alderaan. "The Jedi ourselves cannot provide any reparations if Alderaan were to agree," and as of yet we simply do not know if the Republic will reimburse those who offer sanctuary either. Bail closes his mouth, dark eyes serious as he considers what has just been said. 6,000 of how many? He inquires after a moment, voice solemn. Initial estimates were stated at 80,000 potential refugees, Kigan offers, attempting to feel useful and finally catching on to the plot. 80,000. Bail repeats softly. You could ask the Queen to accept more. 8,000, at least. Alderaan has the resources. With no recompense, I would be relieved if 6,000 were accounted for. My second request is more personal, Lord Organa. I'd like to ask you to assist my partner, and I in finding and convincing other suitable and agreeable worlds to take in our refugees. I understand that this puts your own name and position on the line, however. I accept, Bail says, without hesitation, and Ben smiles fondly. Bail had never hesitated to do his part, regardless of what it might cost him. Christophsis came to mind. I am most grateful, Lord Organa. Ben bows. Follow me to my office, Bail requests, gesturing a hand in guidance. We can call the Queen directly from there. Kigan lifts a brow at that, but Bail, being Bail, doesn't blush. Neither a senator's aide nor a junior member of the royal house should have a direct line to the Queen. Her lover, however. Factly. Master T. Her Mickey and Padawan calls out, resolving out of the ash-laden dust with the Corellian woman slung across her back. Knight Lisa, her partner, becomes visible just behind her, cradling two younglings. All of her searchers are caked in ash and dust, their rebreather masks going through filters rapidly. Samik, the Selonian Padawan, has it the worst. It clings to her fur in heavy clumps, and she has the task of sometimes literally burrowing someone out. The ground shakes warningly every few minutes, and T's nostrils ache from the unusual atmospheric charge created by the distant eruption. Great cracks often crumble away into massive ravines or sinkholes, and only through use of the Force have they avoided more losses today, sometimes being forced to leap to safety when stable ground suddenly dissolved. They've watched half a village shatter and collapse already, buildings folding in on themselves and sliding into the earthen haze of dust and roaring sound. Night Deer, her other Togruta, is serving as their medic, but if they don't leave soon, some of their rescued farmers are going to be beyond saving. Rescue Team 9-2, can you hear me? Loud and clear, Control, Shock replies through her comm, waving the Mickey and Padawan closer in. We're building up to a second eruption. You're too far out. Pull back, Control orders. We're still finding survivors, Shock protests. They've only been on the ground for, she checks her comm, 20 hours. They should have had 3 times that amount. They needed 3 times that. You have to pull back, Control repeats, sounding stressed. You're in the red zone. There's too much activity in that area, and if you're there when the second eruption hits, we can't save all of them, the Knight on the other end whispers. Please pull back, they repeat again. Shakti grits her teeth, a high warning trill singing in the back of her throat, but acknowledges the command. Everyone back to the transport, Shakti orders over her comms. Now, I've got someone down here, Padawan Samik reports. Give me a few more minutes, Master. Knight Torchulu, confirm Padawan Samik's report, Shakti calls. We can sense 2 survivors in the basement beneath us. The structure is unstable, but I'm holding it in place. We'll have them out shortly. Please give us time, the Miralukan Knight responds. Be swift, Shakti acknowledges, kneeling to help Night Deer move one of their more critical patients onto a gurney and into the transport. They'll be crowded, having found stragglers coming in from a village the initial survey had reported lost, while Shakti will get them all to fit. She's not leaving anyone behind that she doesn't absolutely have to. Chapter 5. Blanket, towels, toiletries, canteen, first aid kit, sabbat cards. Obi-Wan touches the last item and glances at Choi, who peers across at him with a bland smile, and drops a hover ball into a different pack. Little things, Master Rancisis had said. Obi-Wan nods at Choi, who blinks serenely back and continues his work. Obi-Wan finishes checking over the pack and marks it complete, moving it to the proper packing pallet. After a day and a half, he's having trouble distinguishing one task from another. They'd even slept down here last night, rations distributed by kitchen droids and a few younger initiates. "How are you doing, Jisel?" he calls. "First level just brought down more blankets, and we have 213 complete packs." She shouts back, climbing over stacks of supplies. "I already sent the first pallet up to the flight decks. We're beating Padawan Moan's team for efficiency," she crows. "Engineer up top says it might be a while before all this gear actually goes anywhere, though. Even after we complete the rescue, they still don't know where all our refugees are going." "My master's working on that," Obi-Wan says. "Well, a lot of Jedi are working on that," he corrects. He hasn't heard from his master since yesterday, but he's getting better at reaching out through their bond and can feel a sense of grim accomplishment. "Yeah, but," she frowns, turning to face him. "They don't know where they're going," she says with emphasis. "Their entire lives are just gone. We're helping them, but all those people have to start over, and they're being split up, and it's a lot. They're relying on us, on the Jedi, to help them, and I feel," she sighs, blue eyes troubled. "Is it enough? What we do?" "We do what we can," Obi-Wan says, somewhat helplessly. "Sometimes that's all there is." "But," "Yeah," Obi-Wan agrees. "It doesn't feel like enough." "So what do we do?" she asks, demanding, looking at him like he, a boy barely a year older than her, held the answers. It was a lot of pressure to put on him, he thought, when half the time he barely knew what he was doing. Obi-Wan takes a minute to think about it, checking over another pack, marking it off on the datapad he's been given. "We do what we can," he repeats. "And I know that doesn't feel like a lot, but we're learners for a reason, Jisel. If what we can do isn't good enough, then we learn to do better, to do more. Find a new skill, train harder, study longer." "You're a learner," she points out. "I'm just me. I'm an initiate, and only barely that. Next month I might be a farmer, or a mechanic, or whatever's left." "You'll be no less what you are next month than who you are today," Shan Jisel, Obi-Wan tells her, something his master often told him. "But you can be more, and whether that's as a Jedi, or a pilot, or a healer, that doesn't matter. You're still capable. You're still you." She stares at him, her luminescent blue eyes bright against her face. "You're pretty smart," she says bluntly. "I don't really get that a lot," Obi-Wan says. "Thank you." She looks down at the packs, her mouth a twisted line. She takes a deep breath and sighs. "Do what I can," she mutters. "Okay, I can do this. It'll be enough." Obi-Wan smiles, turning away so she doesn't think he's laughing at her. Choi skips over to him and holds something up. Obi-Wan frowns at it. "What is that?" he asks the Aline boy, eyeing the purple and bronze contraption warily. "I don't know." He shrugs, peering up at Obi-Wan with slightly disconcerting green eyes. "Should I give it to someone?" I have no idea," Obi-Wan stutters. Choi frowns at him and pouts. "How come you can't answer the easy questions?" "Factly. Die Carabach." Ben flinches at the grating cry, dropping into a defensive stance, only for Lij Kumar to appear, gracelessly shoving a poor protocol droid out of her way, flanked on either side by robed Kali shamans. Her eyes gleam in approval at his stance, and he rights himself, relaxing. "Friend of yours," Ki-Gon murmurs, while Bail Organa smiles tightly at the intimidating new arrival. Bail looks slightly rumpled today, caught up enough in their mission that he fell asleep at his desk the night before. Ben envies him, as his rest comprised of 5 hours in a meditative trance sitting on a bench. He and Ki-Gon had sat down for just a few minutes, having been championing their cause through dozens of offices, and next thing he knew Ki-Gon had been tipped back against the wall dead asleep. To be fair, 3 hours ago they had passed Kit Fisto asleep on his feet, just leaning against the wall, and started a conversation before realizing the master's condition. "Define friend," Ben mutters, and then corrects himself. "A friend of my Padawans." Ki-Gon lifts a brow, and Bail, from the corner of his eye, looks intrigued. Kagan Lij Kumar, Ben nods in greeting, eyeing the poorly disguised, if bladeless, spear in her hand, adorned to seem ceremonial, but still likely solid enough to hurt if she started swinging it. Her green headdress of scarves complement her eyes, and a delicately spun shawl of the same color drapes over her huntress warrior garb. May I introduce Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn and Lord Bail Organa of the Royal House of Alderaan. I wasn't aware you were here, he questions. He had been aware that Kaylee petitioned for entry into the Republic, and further aware that they did so not for resources so much as for the platform in which to confront and harass the Trade Federation, but the Kagans had been staying out of the political mire. Shaman San Luyura, now Ambassador San Luyura, is petitioning for our system, she says. I am only here to support her. I much prefer a real battlefield, though I was curious to see where our Jedi came from. Well, not from here, Ben says amusingly, gesturing to the Senate building around them. The temple is not distant, however. There is too much life on this planet, she comments, her voice grating with disapproval. And not enough. I do not like it. Considering she was raised in the grasslands and rainforests of Kaylee, Ben did not think she would. You might like the temple gardens, though there is nothing to hunt. A shame. She tips her head, her spear moving with emotion. The two shamans escorting her share an amused glance. Is your Padawan here? She inquires. Jashil would much like for me to see how he fares. Ben feels a very odd sense of displacement at that comment, blinking stupidly for a moment. No, he's at the temple. We're on assignment, actually, Ben says. Have you heard of the crisis on Riller 4? By now most of the Senate building was abuzz with it, rumors swirling around, all the Jedi hustling about. The planet is breaking, she says slowly. This I have heard. This is a Jedi affair. We're rescuing any survivors we can before the surface becomes inhospitable, Ben explains. But my task is to find somewhere for them to live once we've rescued them. They cannot simply move and start a new colony, she inquires. They have no resources to do so, Ben says. As it was, Riller 4 was a vital agricultural colony. The Corellian system is going to suffer greatly for this loss. I have been learning of Corellia, Lij Kumar states, her clawed fingers tapping idly on her staff. They are renowned for their pilots and mechanics, are they not? They are considered superior space travelers. Yes, Ben replies, peering at her reptilian eyes and wondering what she's thinking. How many are refugees? She practices the word, and it comes off her tongue slightly flawed, too rough and short. 80,000, though we seem to have found placement for nearly 30,000 of that. Lij Kumar makes a soft sort of rumbling sound and turns to her shamans. For a whispered conversation, the Kalish are still rather loud, but their language is unintelligible to all but a few supremely well-updated protocol droids. 20,000, Lij Kumar states, turning back to them. Pardon. Qui-Gon inquires, brow deeply furrowed. We will take 20,000, she states more clearly, and Ben can feel the grin she holds behind the mask, her eyes alight. The Kalish have many worlds now, and not so many people. We have many new technologies also that are strange to us. We will take 20,000 refugees if Corellia will teach us of our new vessels and space stations. Kalish will thrive, and Corellia will thrive. This is a deal we will make. Ah, I see, Qui-Gon states, clearly taken off guard. Are you certain your infrastructure can support such a sudden influx? Ben inquires. I appreciate your generosity, but I don't want to tip the balance of your system unfavorably. Lij Kumar waves a hand dismissively. Be less cautious, Dikarabak. The Huk have left behind many empty villages the Kalish cannot fill. We are many less now than we were before the Huk War. Entire generations have been lost, she says, making a gesture to her brow in remembrance, her shamans echoing the motion. Farmlands too have been growing wild, abandoned. Our people will make each other stronger. This is my victory. One shaman huffs a sound that might be a laugh, and Lij Kumar shoots a look at him. Kagan Jashila will have much catching up to do, the shaman rasps quietly, purely amused. To be once more worthy of you. Lij Kumar clucks her tongue. My heart of hearts will find a way, I'm sure. preferably without starting another war. Ben inquires hopefully. Perhaps, she replies, filled with amusement. There are more details to discuss, and Belle takes over explaining to one of her shaman advisors how to best handle the situation, offering to introduce her and Ambassador San Luyura to their Corellian counterparts. That was remarkably fortuitous, Qui-Gon comments, a hint of suspicion in his voice. The Force provides, Ben replies lightly, feeling far less conflicted about the matter with the Force whispering in his ear and his vision flickering of star-like flowers blooming in yellow clay. Though I think I'd hesitate to experience the cultural blending of Kaylee warrior mysticism and Corellian. Qui-Gon's lips part, and his brows draw tightly together in bemusement. Ah, yes, that's sure to be. There is no diplomatic phrase for that. Terrifying. Qui-Gon gives him a surprised look. I was going to say entertaining. Chapter 6. We're losing the continent, a surveyor whispers hopelessly. Everyone in the Crisis Command Center watches the predictive program extrapolate the wave that is going to swallow the ground under their feet. Already the shaking is a nonstop presence, which rolls in waves. Plo Koon gathers himself, feeling fear ripple out from the population as the world itself sighs in relief, even as it's ripped apart. Natural disasters are not evil, they simply are. Order all transports to prepare for final evacuation, Plo orders, letting nothing of his own painful sense of how much they could still do waver in his voice. They did not have the time. They did not have the means. We were not enough. Sir, one knight hesitates. Sir, there's still 15,000 on the ground and more coming. Then it is all or nothing, Plo says firmly. We do what we can. His vocoder crackles, and he steels himself, letting nothing but certainty and serenity out into the Force. Prepare for final evacuation. Yes, Master Koon. The knight nods, struggling to quell their own distress. We do what we can, he thinks wearily. Koon leaves the temporary shelter they've set up, reaching out with his senses and trying to parse past the energy crackling through the ground. Master T, he calls out, more in the Force than anything else, as she stumbles out of her own transport, packed with survivors and being swarmed by medics. She hesitates, her first instinct to guide those she has saved, but she challenges herself to trust the medics and the rest of her team and moves towards him. Master Koon, she inquires, every inch of her the same shade of ashen brown, her teeth and eyes gleaming. He caught a glimpse of her this morning, in her full huntress regalia, and had admired her courage and defiance in the face of an appalling judgment by his fellow counselors. But then, he had never been a strict traditionalist himself. Gather any other master you can find, he says quietly, just for the two of them. Her eyes narrow, and she tips her head thoughtfully, asking without asking. We're going to form a perimeter, as wide as we can, he says, and we are going to hold this ground. For as long as is possible. The final evacuation, she asks, gaze deeply troubled. She could feel the Force crying out, telling her there were more they could save, just as he could. We are losing the continent, Koon admits gravely. We are out of time. Then we will hold, she vows, as long as we can. Force be with you. He bows his head. To his surprise, she reaches up and lays a hand on his cheek, and he can feel her sorrow and understanding through that comforting touch. Force be with us all, she murmurs, and then she is off at a Force-enhanced run, seeking out the other masters through the haze and confusion of the thousands crowding the landing pads. Koon sighs deeply, and himself turns to the task. Factly. You saved our lives there, ma'am. The pilot wipes sweat off his brow as Shmi emerges from the maintenance hatch. She crawls out, fluid staining her hands and several bruises on her side and on her head, and glowers at him. Get a different pilot, she orders. You've overheated the power regulators twice. If you do it a third time, they will blow, and all of us will die. You should not have claimed to know how to handle a craft you were not trained to fly. Ma'am, now hold on. He protests, and Shmi crosses her arms. You don't understand. Understand this, she cuts him off. This vessel is capable of carrying 2,000 souls, and is expected on the planet below immediately, and if we fail, they die. If you overheat the power regulators, they die. If you blow the thruster relay again, we'll fail to break atmosphere, and they'll die. You are unfit. He swallows. He's not a young pilot, cocksure of himself, but he's clearly out of his league. I'm all we've got, he says helplessly. I had training on the old Besh 9s, and this seemed close enough. There just weren't enough pilots. Shmi sighs deeply and wipes sweat off her neck, smearing more grease. She'd been sent on one of the last transports from the temple to ensure that those space birds they scraped into flying stayed in the air long enough to be of use, and had ended up jumping from ship to ship as failures were suffered and repaired, and somehow ended up in charge when the chief mechanic for this convoy failed to join the rendezvous, his craft having dropped out of hyperspace well before reaching the Ryler system. Mechanics on other vessels started reporting to her when she answered a question no one else could, and now her 2 junior mechanics were currently on the ground, checking over those transports before they lifted after one of the first runs had gone catastrophically wrong, blowing a propulsion engine on liftoff. One astromech had been left on the last frigate, supplanting the faulty navigation system, and the other was now monitoring the power flow of this vessel with excruciating care. We do what we can, Shmi sighs. I will pilot. You will co-pilot. Are you sure? He asks, nervous and ashamed. I mean, you clearly have the mechanical knowledge, but, no disrespect, Jedi ma'am. I am sure, Shmi told him with the confidence she didn't entirely feel. She had taken advantage of the simulators in the temple, partly to learn and partly, she loved flying. Loved the feeling of taking off, even in simulation, and leaving worlds behind her, as easily as she wishes she could have left behind Tatooine, and her past, and all the horrors there. But a simulator was not a ship, and no lives were in danger there. I am sure, she repeats, praying to our Amu for all of their sakes. Mother, bless me and let me lift them from despair, as I have been lifted. She blinks back sudden tears and bites her tongue at the overwhelming swell of emotion that is the knowledge that she did not say goodbye to Anakin before she was swept up in the mission. No despair, no fear, no doubt, she scolds herself. I am not leaving him today. I am not leaving anyone. Factly. Master Naasade. Adi Gallia calls out, halting them from across the corridor and turning a dozen or so curious heads. The Jedi all move towards each other, and the milling individuals in between slightly part to make way for them, though a few offer them only disdainful looks as they go around. You could have comment, Ben remarks, once they are at a polite distance. I wasn't looking for you, she says dismissively. I'm looking for the Corellian ambassador. He's with the Kaleesh representatives, or he was this morning, Ben replies. They've agreed to take in as many as 20,000 refugees. Adi's brow shoots up, impressed and assessing. Ben tips his head in acknowledgement of the accomplishment, but claims no credit. The final evacuation order has been given on Riller 4, Adi informs them. How many did we? Kigan asks, looming over his shorter counterparts. Adi swallows tightly, blue eyes shadowed. From last report, 74,000, give or take, if we manage to get all of them off the landing platform that are already there. The 3 Jedi share a moment of quiet, and Ben closes his eyes briefly, shuddering for the memory of planets he'd seen decimated during the Clone Wars echoed here and now. When he opens them, both of the other 2 Jedi are frowning pensively at his reaction, but he offers them no answers. We found placement for as many as 62,000, Kigan says stiffly. Adi looks between them again, doubly impressed. How did you get through to the committees that quickly? She asks grudgingly. We didn't, Kigan replies, drawling. We bypassed them entirely. He tilts his head towards Ben, so she knows who to blame. She narrows her eyes at him, and Ben shoots Kigan a dirty look. Apparently, the reservations Jin held after their conversation yesterday were wearing off. Or I was entirely dismissed, Ben thinks sourly, well aware of the stubbornness of Jedi Master Kigan Jinn. We do what we can, he sighs internally. Really, she says flatly. I made no promises of recompense. These worlds have offered their aid to the refugees of Ryler 4 freely, and in complete generosity. They are aware that they may receive nothing for this, and they have given their pledge regardless. Ben explains himself, feeling rather put upon to do so. The committees can be addressed in time, but our need was immediate. It seems some good can come of politicians after all, Keegan mutters ruefully. Night Gallia glares at him, and he colors, shifting apologetically. Ben lifts a brow, having been entirely unaware that Adi Gallia could cow the great Keegan Jan. Interesting. Factually. By all the gods, someone breathed out as the transport lifted, not waiting for the doors to close. As the vessel rose above its own dust, full to the brim with shaken survivors and ragged nerve rescuers, they could see. And not to the storm. 100 small transports or more pulling up into clear air, and around the landing platforms, dotted like monoliths, dozens of Jedi Masters, proud and immovable, hands held open palmed at their sides, facing the ground. You could almost see a glow around them, threaded between the Masters, a hue of blue, or gold, or green, and beyond them, beyond that. Destruction. The world was writhing and roaring, massive hills rolling like waves on water, great chunks of stone and earth lifting and collapsing, the main settlement swallowed in the turbulence, and a great black cloud in the distance, coming for all of them. I didn't know Jedi could do that. Someone whispered in awe. Just stop the world. Not the whole world, someone else replied, watching ash and fire rise in the horizon. The doors closed, catching the dust from the dozen other ships rising in their wake. Factually. Obi-Wan, Sui Choi, and Shan Jisoo stand out of the way, backs pressed to the pallets they've packed and brought up, as transports start trickling back into the temple, spewing dust and ash-laden Jedi and mechanics and medics. It had been 4 whole days since the cry for help came from Riller 4, and seemed at once both shorter and longer. The temple felt eerily devoid, with so many absent, and it gave Obi-Wan the chills. He was not alone in that, and once the junior Padawans were essentially finished and the star room greatly reduced, they had taken to engaging the initiates to distract them from the bright absence of the temple population, for which the Kretchamisters were exceedingly grateful. They all ate together, at scheduled times, and even then it was painfully obvious how bereft they were with just the initiates, junior Padawans, elders, and a few scattered masters and residents. So they were greatly relieved that the rescue teams were starting to trickle back in, though reports were underwhelming. 71,489 survivors. They saved as many as they could, it just didn't seem like enough. What made it worse, so much worse, however, was that Obi-Wan could see how upset the returning Jedi were, or had been. Tears tracks were blatantly obvious on soot-stained faces. One Wookiee had shuffled off the transport and over to the edge of the platform, jerkily trying to brush the clumps of dirt and clay from their fur with very little success. "Come on," Obi-Wan says, nudging Shan Jisoo with an elbow and Sui Choi with a hand. "Get them some water, or take them to the dining hall to get something to eat or anything." "We'll get in the way," Sui Choi points out. "They look," he trails off glumly, the force feeling heavy and oppressive, like rain clouds on an already damp day. "That's the point, I think," Shan says, nodding and pushing away from the pallets. "They've done what they can for Riller 4, so we'll do what we can for them." Sui blinks and nods, brightening. "Okay, I understand." He pulls the purple and bronze contraption from his belt, where it's been tied for several days as they puzzled what function it possessed, and darted into the throng of weary knights and masters and temple employees, holding it up and smiling widely, eyes bright and soothing. He earned puzzled looks and awkward smiles, a few knights prodding the object curiously and shaking their heads in bafflement, the tension bleeding away from their bodies for the distraction. Jisoo herself skipped over to a trio of shell-shocked-looking knights and took the hands of 2 of them without warning, skipping them towards the lifts and herding the 3rd knight with them, and a few more along the way. Obi-Wan nods to himself and ducks around the milling personnel over to where the Wookiee was standing, hands covering their face, upset spilling off them, uneasily released. "Here." Obi-Wan pulls a comb from his boot, where Choi had stuck it as an extra, and Obi-Wan had forgotten about it. He has a feeling that maybe there was the will of the Force in that. I think I can help you, he says, offering a smile. We do what we can, he thinks. And this I can do. Part 3. What is sown? Chapter 1. Obi-Wan blinks himself awake to the blue shadows of very early morning, just a few seconds before he can feel his master lean over his bed and drop a hand on his shoulder. It's time to get up. Obi-Wan garbles, drawing the comforter around his shoulders tighter in reluctance. "Es early, Master." "Well," Master Ben replies, "I won't force you, but I thought you might enjoy a spot of mischief." Obi-Wan, whose eyes had been sliding back shut, blinks them open again and finally obliges in rolling over, peering curiously up at his master, who bore a smirk that was very well suited to his face. "Mischief," Obi-Wan repeats. Master Ben nods, and a drop of water lands on Obi-Wan's nose from his master's damp hair. Obi-Wan brushes it off and wonders how well his master did not sleep last night if he's already been up and showered. Obi-Wan's dreams have improved dramatically as his shields were rebuilt, but his master's problems were more chronic. "I'm up." Obi-Wan nods, and his master steps back so the Padawan actually can get up. He disappears back into the living area, giving Obi-Wan privacy to dress and properly wake, and when he exits their room his master even has breakfast ready. They haven't bothered with the lights, relying instead of the dim of pre-dawn through the windows, and the pale pink and silver glow of the bioluminescent vines that have firmly taken hold of the ceiling and most of the walls. "Breakfast?" Obi-Wan asks suspiciously, because they rarely ate in their quarters. His master smiles mischievously, and Obi-Wan eyes him in suspicion. He adores his master, really, admires and respects him, but his master also has a habit of making Obi-Wan's life difficult. Usually with a smile on his face. "I haven't done my poetry reading," Obi-Wan mutters, turning to go fetch his data pads. His master stops him. "I'll forgive you the assignment for this morning, Obi-Wan. But how is your history project going?" he inquires. Slowly. Obi-Wan winces a little. His master didn't give him a deadline, but it was taking a while, and Obi-Wan wanted to do his absolute best on the assignment. If the Council of First Knowledge didn't think it was up to par, he'd have to be re-enrolled in a formal history class next cycle. His master had started by sitting Obi-Wan down and discussing what he already knew about Jedi history, and told him his general knowledge was as good as it needed to be. As most initiates is by the time they leave the creche, he'd also muttered. Obi-Wan's assignment, therefore, focused less on events and more on the actual Jedi themselves. Master Ben had assigned his Padawan to compile a study of all the Jedi Temples. "All of them?" he'd questioned hesitantly, seeing years of digging through archives ahead of him. "Let's say any active temple since the last war against the Sith," his master had allowed instead, relieving Obi-Wan greatly. "I want you to give me a brief bio of what made each temple unique, when they were founded, when they were abandoned, and how many Jedi they housed and produced," his master asked of him. Obi-Wan was finding it to be a straightforward, but incredibly tedious assignment. Slowly, his master repeats, lifting a brow. "There's a lot of information on the temples, Master. It's just," Obi-Wan waves his hands a bit, trying to explain how frustratingly difficult it was to find what he needed. The archives didn't lack for sheer volume of information, but filtering the temples by data was all but impossible. There was no standard format on the records of the temples, which dated back thousands, tens of thousands of years. Not well organized, not for this assignment, at least. Madam News records are always very well kept. Obi-Wan is saved by the arrival of Shmi, returning to their quarters with Master T in tow, distracting his master from interrogating him further. "Good morning, Shock." Master Ben smiled and received a reserved head tilt from a very amused Togruta. Obi-Wan was still getting used to seeing Master T in her Shilly Hunter's regalia instead of Jedi robes, but he quietly agreed with his master that the yellow and white tunics and red-brown leggings suited Shmi much better than her drab-gray dresses. "Where's Anakin?" Obi-Wan inquired. "Still asleep, I should think." Shmi sends a questioning look Master Ben's way, and Ben nods, handing the tea tray to Shock to carry, and one laden and serving dishes to Obi-Wan, who turns and walks it to their little round table. "Can I ask what we're up to now?" Obi-Wan waits until they're all seated, serving themselves breakfast rice and fresh fruit slices. Obi-Wan sets a few aside on his plate for Anakin once he wakes up. There is even a small tureen of roasted insects for Shmi, which Master T partakes of as well. Obi-Wan has tried some, but he's not fond of that particular culinary experience. "We're moving quarters," Shmi answers him, shooting a somewhat exasperated look at the two Jedi Masters on either side of her. They think it will be amusing to do so in secret, and watch how long it takes the Council to figure it out. "It will be amusing," Ben replies, pointing at Shmi with his chopsticks. "And it will be making a point," Shakti adds with a gleam in her eyes, the aquafangs on her torque necklace rattling when she moves. "I will not sit idle and wait for permission to do what I know is right. None of us will, as none of us should," she adds, and Obi-Wan stills under the cool focus she pins him with for a moment before moving on. "Okay," Obi-Wan nods. He knows what the tenets of the Jedi Code have to say about age restrictions, but it simply makes sense to him that Shmi should be a Jedi. Not only for her sake, but for what she can teach them. Obi-Wan has learned a lot from her, and even his master will seek Shmi's advice or perspective, and they are all wiser for it. That thought in mind, Obi-Wan chews through his rice, a problem surfacing in his thoughts. He glances between Shakti and Master Ben. Masters," he asks quietly, earning their attention and feeling yet again the sheer presence both of them carry in their eyes. Forced together, they were worse than Master Windu. "Yes, Padawan," Master Ben prompts him. Are there any other masters looking for a new Padawan? There's Siri and Sean and Sui, and they're all nearly 13, but they'd be such good Jedi. But they tell Siri she's too rough, and no one even looks at Sean and Sui so considerate. But he's shy, and Obi-Wan trails off helplessly, trying to push back the sheer well of frustration he feels, because they deserve to be Jedi. They deserve the same chance Obi-Wan got, and he doesn't think they'll get it and is wrong. A perfect example of the problem, Obi-Wan. His master offers him a half smile hiding so much emotion and implication that Obi-Wan swallows tightly, feeling like there is something in that statement that is a warning. "I think there are a few Jedi we could encourage towards their next Padawans." "It is not a decision that should be forced," Shmi warns softly. "For the sake of the student, at the very least." "Oh, I know," Ben tips his head in acknowledgement. "But sometimes a little pressure does not go amiss," Shakti says primly, her smile flashing a hint of her sharper teeth. Chapter 2. "Subtle, you think you are." Yoda grumbles irritably, eyes closed as he meditated, or attempted to, beneath one of his favorite trees on a grassy knoll near the swamp gardens. "What need have I for subtlety, Master Yoda?" Ben laughs softly, striding up the hill to lower himself before the elderly master. "Troublesome, you are," Yoda mutters. "Less obviously troublesome, I would appreciate you to be." "That would invalidate the point, Master Yoda." Ben sighs. "As it is, my subtlety escapes most of this temple." "Challenge them, you do?" Yoda agrees. "Grasp why they do not. Leading them by the whiskers, you are, and see it. Too few can. Ask me to challenge you, many do. When do you think I could?" He actually sounds curious, eyes cracking open, ears lifting. "Oh, Master Yoda, don't play old age. You know you could win the moment you wanted to." Ben shakes his head, amused. "Know that, do I?" Yoda asks, a shadow in his voice, ears drooping, and Ben draws back, realizing he has miscalculated. Of everyone, Yoda is the least changed in the past or future, and Ben has forgotten that there are still some things Yoda does not know that Yoda has not done. He is already 40 years beyond his species' typical lifespan, and refused to take another Padawan after Yanduku because he feared dying before their training was complete. He has been waiting decades now to pass peacefully in his sleep, and does not know that he has decades yet to go. Does not know any more the strength still left in him. Did not, at least, until Ben just told him what his future looked like. "I'm sorry," Ben whispers, stricken with his own carelessness. HMPH. Yoda cracks his eyes open wider, giving Ben a short look that usually preceded a whack with his gimmer stick. Thankfully, said object was lying in the grass, and not in the elder's hands. Come to me, Qui-Gon Jinn has. Many questions he had. Troubling questions, long he has avoided. Answers I gave him, but clarity him. Yoda shakes his head. Instruct him to take a new Padawan you have. Ask many after their Padawans, you have, and frown at them when none they have, you do. To teaching, not all are suited. Learn, not all can. Ben sighs at that comment, returning Yoda's short frown with a scowl of his own. You could take another. Since I have already spoiled the surprise, I should tell you outright that you have enough time left yet to train another Padawan. Or two. A Padawan in particular, you have in mind. Yoda inquires curiously, contemplative. For you, no, Ben shakes his head. Though if I can find our illustrious Master Jinn, I have one for him. And perhaps Knight Gallia, should I get a word out before she stalks away from my presence. A student I had chosen for Master Jinn. Usurped him, you did. Yoda grumbles. Cheated, you have. Ben rolls his eyes. You and Master Windu both, Ben mutters, correcting himself. He has to correct himself. To remind himself that his friends are lost in a future changed, and that he is a stranger now to them, no matter how deeply he cares. It's not cheating. And Ben shakes his head. I loved my master, but the grief we caused each other never healed. Do you know what it's like to look him in the face and just want to have a real screaming row, except he looks back at me and he has no idea who I am? Lonely you are, Yoda says quietly, looking at him with somber green eyes. Sometimes they feel more unreachable standing right in front of me than they ever were as ghosts, Ben whispers, staring back at Yoda. But if that is my punishment for the reward of their lives of the second chance, I can live with it. I have lived with worse. He wipes a hand over his face, brushing away the beginnings of tears. Know them better than they do, you do, Yoda says sagely. Unsettle them, that does. Unsettling you are. Greatly unsettling. Much darkness you carry with you. Our failures you carry, and judge us for them, you do. Ben frowns, pensive. Don't you? He asks the elder. You have watched generations of us come and go. Do you not ever rage at how many mistakes we repeat? There is no passion, there is serenity, Yoda intones sternly. Bantha shit, Ben scoffs. You can no more have serenity without passion than you can have light without dark. Serenity is not the absence of passion, it is its mastery. Believe me, Master Yoda, passion, emotion, ignorance, chaos, attachment, death, I have tried to carve those things out of myself, and all that I had left when they were gone was absence. I was not made whole, I was not a better Jedi, I was no one, and I was without hope. Ben hadn't realized then how very fine a line he walked, not towards falling, but towards something far worse. He had been dangerously unmoored in spirit, and in the Force. He remembers long nights walk in the desert, only half of himself touching the living world, hallucinating ghosts and treading against real madness. He had made a rare few trips off-world, to help Bail establish and train his rebel cells, to help Reva learn how to coach Leia into hiding what she was as she grew. And sometimes he'd sit in that ship, drifting in the black, and he'd wonder what would happen if he didn't go back. If he just kept drifting, off into the nothingness, if it would consume him, come into him, if it would take away his pain, and let him dissolve into oblivion. He'd come out of trances like that half-dead, the Force screaming at him, to find that he had drifted, sometimes for days, not eating, not drinking, not moving. When he'd come back, and Beru had screamed and raged at him, cried for him, he'd been on the brink of collapse, his mind had been failing, and her passion had been a blazing sun against the pervasive cold that had made him numb. Death wasn't a choice, not really. Death claimed everything. But living was, and Beru had forced him to make it. Forced him to take hold of his own life and choose. But life, like darkness, had to be chosen every day, again and again, and he had wavered along the path, stumbled, wandered. He'd fallen headfirst into depression once he actually let himself feel, had staggered into alcoholism, unable to sleep without a drink or three, lost his voice more than once from lack of use, from overuse. It had hardly been the first time he screamed into the sandstorm, or into the nothing of the empty waste. But he kept choosing to live, kept letting Beru bring him into her kitchen, offer him tea, and tell him stories. He relearned how to smile for Luke, and how to remember without breaking down completely. Owen had gotten angry when Ben had told Luke of Anakin. Anakin as Ben remembered him, and not as what he'd left him as. He'd gotten furious when Ben told him of the Force, and when Ben tried to teach. There had been a look in Beru's eyes that last time, when Owen had all but bodily thrown Ben from the house, swearing that Luke would never be a Jedi, that Ben was just a mad wizard who ought to let it all die. Owen had forbid him from coming back, and Beru. She'd looked at him, standing in the sand at sunset, like the day he'd first arrived, and her gaze had sworn that she would see him again. But she hadn't. For the first time, Ben wonders if his future past still exists, wonders if she is still there, hoping he hasn't gone off to let himself die. Wonders if she has gone to his hovel and found it empty and full of dust. Wonders if she has cried for him once more. Thwack! Son of a Karking, Ben swears, hands jerking up to cover the new bruise on his skull, and shoots a watery glare at Yoda, who is unrepentant. Spreading misery all around my tree you were, Yoda grumps. Wallowing, bad for the health, it is. Bad for my tree, it is. Sad, you are. Yoda frowns, lowering his gimmer stick. Sad, you have made me. And insolent. Flaunt the coal so loudly you should not. It's guidance many need. It is a flawed guide, Master Yoda, Ben replies irritably. A better one, have you? Yoda grumbles. The old code wasn't so bad, Ben grumbles back. Passion, yet serenity. A stronger duality, the old code, Yoda says peevishly. Cling to both, many tried, and failed. It is not the fault of the student if that master cannot teach them to reach serenity through passion, Ben retorts. Teach what one never learned, difficult. That is, Yoda sighs. Wise you are. Such wisdom few ever attained. Attain it without great suffering none have. Claim otherwise, would you? He challenges. No, Ben sighs. Even the Mandalorian teachings, which kept order in war, recognized that one did not learn without being tried. But they can learn nothing if they do not try. We do them no favors by denying that such strength to do as we ask them to do does exist. They cannot master any emotion if they do not first understand it, and understanding it means feeling it, means accepting that it is. Yoda gives him a narrow look. Perhaps. Master Yoda, I believed it once. Do you understand that? Ben asks angrily. I truly believed that someone could live without emotion, and that I simply failed to do so. I spent half my life trying to bury myself to accomplish the impossible, and do you know what? They called me a perfect Jedi. I pretended, and I lied, and they said I was the example all should look up to, and my Padawan, he hated me for it, in the end. I was too busy trying to be what the order demanded I be to do what I should have done for him, and because of that, Ben chokes on the words, on the pain, and grinds down on his teeth, forcing air in and out through his nose. I failed him. I failed everyone. An acrid scent reaches his nose, and Ben flinches to realize the grass just around his body was withering and burning. I can't do this, he reminds himself, dragging the chaos of his emotions back into the delicate harmony that existed within his soul, recentering himself into the eye of the storm. There is no endless field here on which he can release that storm. Here, that would result in egregious property damage that no one could afford. Losing we were. Yoda asks very quietly. This war with the Sith. Losing? Ben huffs raggedly. Master Yoda, no. Ben shakes his head, his hands trembling. I did not come back by some miracle because we were losing. We lost. We lost. And we died. By the time I came back there were, perhaps 9 Jedi Masters left in the galaxy. 3 times that many knights, and a scattering of Padawans, and if they were very, very lucky, They rid themselves of everything that made them Jedi and disappear so well that the Sith will never find them. I exiled myself on Tatooine. The last I knew of you, you were heading into exile in the Dagobah system, and everyone else was running as far and as fast as they could. It spills out of him, and he knows he should stop, that this was not Yoda's burden to bear, but he couldn't. It burned in his mind. He woke every day with the scratching at the corners of his thoughts, and it wanted out. He wanted to scream it to every single one of them so that they would see, so that they would learn, so that they could fight. But he remembers how even a far vaguer fear crept through the temple after Qui-Gon's death, warping the path all of them walked, weakening their certainty, growing into a dread that clouded their senses and whispered to them in the dark until it was always there, in the back of their minds, waiting to betray them. I'm sorry, Ben gasps. I shouldn't have told you. Told me? You have, Yoda murmurs, truly stricken, and Ben cringes away from that look in his ancient eyes. Should or should not have. An argument we need have not. He pauses, curling in on himself slightly, gaze far away, seeking the refuge of the Force, seeking guidance. Ben waits, but Yoda is not more forthcoming, and the Master is eventually forced to leave him to his meditation. I'm sorry, Ben repeats quietly. Chapter 3. Obi-Wan is slightly discomfited by the transition to his own room, as admittedly fun as it had been to try and shuffle Shmi's mattress through the corridors at the early hours of dawn. His meager possessions took up far too little space in a room designed for a slightly larger species, and it was different, to have only his own presence echoing back at him from the walls. His master had graciously offered Obi-Wan a monochromatic comforter, and Obi-Wan was holding it now, hovering on the threshold, just shy of actually leaving his room. The day had started so well, but when his master had returned in the evening he'd been. Obi-Wan catches glimpses of deeper emotions from his master sometimes, usually just after they've woken from nightmares, and once after his master's challenge bout with Master Jan, and this was 1,000 times worse. His master moved slowly, and seemed preoccupied, but he felt like he was sickened by grief, like he was wounded, and Obi-Wan shuddered, hiding away from that feeling, because if it was a wound, it felt like a poisonous one. It wasn't safe, and it was consuming his master. Obi-Wan takes a breath and slips out into the living area, where Master Ben is still sitting on the sofa, staring at the opposite wall and cradling a tea that had long gone stone cold. He hardly even seems to notice his Padawan until Obi-Wan has slipped the comforter around his shoulders and pulled the cup from his hands, padding to the kitchen, and returning with a fresh one, hot from the kettle. I'm not being a very good master, am I? Ben asks tiredly. Obi-Wan looks his master in the eyes and shrugs. You have your moments, he says. As he'd hoped, that startles a laugh out of the older man, and a bit of light returns to his eyes. Do I indeed? His lips turn a little towards a smile, and Obi-Wan flops down next to his master and hugs him. You do, Obi-Wan says. I promise. His master seems unusually startled by the hug, and then melts into it. Well, he says softly, turning to lean into his Padawan, his beard tickling Obi-Wan's scalp. I suppose there is that then. Factly. Shakti grits her teeth and reminds herself that she is meant to be meditating. Meditation is meant to be relaxing. And perhaps it might be, if it were not all she were allowed to do. They would not assign her missions. They would not let her teach classes. She did not have work for the Reconciliation Council to do, and the uselessness she felt was beginning to wear on her nerves. Still being under medical restrictions to not delve any deeper into the Force than meditation was also straining her calm. She did not have the worst case of Force shock among all the masters who held the ground on Ruler 4, but the after-effects still lingered, affecting her control of her use of the Force. She could probably levitate every statue in the room of 1,000 fountains at once right now, but summoning her lightsaber to her hand was beyond her, and would probably result in some form of fire. It was euphorically powerful, and yet uneasily disgruntling. Shakti found the latter capability far more useful than the former. Yet as ever, when it was at its worst, her chosen Padawan appeared, and the reminder of why she had chosen to walk a path regardless of its difficulties was a balm to her soul. Shmi, Shock smiles warmly, rising from the curtained alcove in their living area and holding out her hands to Shmi, who never hesitated to take them. Shmi was less reserved to touch than most, and Shock had found herself picking up her Padawans, her friends' habits. "Something troubling you?" she asks. There is nothing ever obvious about Shmi's feelings, but the bond between them had been so easy to form, and Shmi let her peek past her shields freely. Shmi tilts her head, considering her own state of being. "I have just been speaking with Dragon Clan. They were telling me about little creatures that live within our bodies and connect us to the Force." Shock feels her eyes fall shut of their own accord and an irritated trill escapes her. "Midichlorians are not creatures, and no, you are not infested with them. Rumor has it that Yoda made that story up as a Padawan serving creche duty, and his line has perpetuated it ever since, telling younglings they were taken in so as to contain the infestation. The creche masters are never amused by it." Shmi glances briefly away and then back towards Shock T, who has learned to recognize the gesture as Shmi taking a heartbeat to overcome a lifetime of strict obedience and cowering in the face of the mildest upset. "Are they not real, then? I had thought the healers mentioned them when Anakin and I arrived, suggesting he be tested, though I declined." "Oh, they do exist," Shock T says. "Midichlorians are sort of particles," she explains, knowing Shmi had a superb grasp of physics. "The Force itself cannot be quantified nor qualified, but midichlorians, a byproduct of the Force, can be, as they are produced whenever the Force interacts with physical matter, be it a person, plant, or object." Shmi nods, following along with sharp attention. "Why, we don't know," Shock adds. "We just know that it happens. Therefore, those things or persons who interact heavily with the Force as a result have a high midichlorian count, and those who have interacted little with it have a lower midichlorian count." Shmi frowns slightly and Shock T pauses, waiting for her to voice what has perturbed her. "And the midichlorian count, this is how the Jedi determine which children they will take into the temple?" she inquires inquisitively. "It is," Shock T nods. "So you only take in those who have interacted heavily with the Force from a young age." Shmi clarifies. "If midichlorians build as one interacts with the Force, can it then not rise later in life as one grasps the ability? Could an adult who found their connection to the Force after childhood not still gain the strength of a knight?" Shock T does not wince, but she is solemn. "Yes," she says. Shmi's small frown becomes pronounced. "Why?" Shock T sighs. "I suppose for the certainty that the student can learn, but in truth I do not know why that decision was made, and why that is what we deem the only right way," she confesses. "That decision was made long ago. If I have Anakin's strength now, I did not have it as a child," Shmi says. "I have been amongst your younglings, and I have known children of the Outer Rim all my life. By any comparison, the only younglings you take in are prodigies and geniuses, or born into a people who are by nature possessed of the Force." Shock T studies Shmi's face. "You think it's wrong," she realizes. "I think it denies us much," Shmi says. "The Jedi and those who could be Jedi." Factually, Adi Gallia did not earn her appointment to be the Temple's ambassador to the Senate by chance. In spite of her youth, she has an experienced grasp of the nuances of intent, her own intuition honed to trace rumor to origin and truth from lie and lie from omission. She can parse the energy of a room or a crowd, part instigator from follower, and above all, she could do all of this without ever giving herself away. In other words, she knows when a plot is afoot, and she is not fooled. The illustrious Master Jin was renowned for a practice of springing the trap he found himself walking into. Adi found that inelegant. "Why let the jaw snap shut," she muses, "when you can simply snatch the treat?" Adi had been very, very good at trick puzzles as a youngling. "Can I help you, Knight Gallia?" Master Unsan, a mathematician and instructor, inquired softly, pausing the lecture they were holding for a mixed group of initiates and Padawans. The younglings in question tried valiantly to pretend they were not rabidly curious as to her presence. "My apologies for my timing, Master Unsan." Adi bows politely. "I have need of Initiate Tachi if you can spare her." The Bith Jedi makes a thoughtful sound and nods, though the girl in question has frozen stiffly in her seat, radiating apprehension. Initiate Tachi. Master Unsound prompts, and the girl jerks before rising and lifting her chin, refusing to waver in front of her age mates as she stepped after Night Gallia. Adi has been keeping one eye on this girl. Initiate Tachi is remarked upon to be headstrong, proud, and rough-mannered. She is opinionated, loudly so, wild-tempered, and sharply intelligent. There is a note in her file that remarks specifically that Tachi can be unkind. She's slated for a position in the Explorer Corps, though she has half a year yet before she ages out. Like most her age, she is frightened that the slightest incident will have her dismissed early from the temple. There have been 1 or 2 incidents. Adi leads her from the classroom, and the girl is straight-backed, chin lifted, gaze straight ahead. Not defiant, but simply not meek either. Adi smiles. She's perfect. Chapter 4. Obi-Wan feels the tight and instant sear of a saber touch, and yelps, dropping the blade and wincing when the gold and white hilt of his master's borrowed saber clatters on the ground. Sorry, Master, Obi-Wan says quickly, ducking down to scoop it back up. His master just shakes his head and steps forward, reaching for Obi-Wan's arm, and turning it so the boy can see the red mark he just scored on his own skin. I'm glad I'm in sleeveless tunics, he thinks, remembering the last time he melted a patch of synth cloth into his skin. The sears hurt, but they were clean and healed easily. The melted synth cloth, on the other hand, had to be scrubbed out of the burns. If it were a training saber, the sears wouldn't be quite so harsh, but his master's blade, and his own, were multi-crystal and high-powered. They didn't have as low a setting as a training saber, and Obi-Wan had borrowed some of his master's insanity and insisted that if he were supposed to learn quickly, he'd learn better by using a real blade. His master had seemed pleased by his Padawan's self-assessment and easily complied, lending his own saber, which had given Obi-Wan goosebumps. Obi-Wan's own blade gave him a brief rush of revitalization, like stepping outside into clean, cool air in the morning. His master's blade didn't feel like that. When Obi-Wan held his master's lightsaber, he could feel a hum in his bones, and the power trapped inside like caged lightning, just waiting to be released. Balancing the two was quite a trick. I don't think I'm quite cut out for reverse grip Jarke, Master, Obi-Wan huffs, twitching only a little when his master smears salve over the sear. Perhaps, but we should study it nonetheless, Master Ben replies. Jarke, the art of wielding 2 blades, enhances your reach and your force. A reverse grip enhances your maneuverability, defense, and provides a tricky challenge to those used to fighting a more traditional opponent. Combined, he trails off, letting Obi-Wan put the pieces together for himself. I understand, Master, Obi-Wan says. I just don't think I'm well suited to it. His master hums in response, and Obi-Wan discreetly rolls his eyes, though inside he feels a prickle of shame that his skills are not enough. His master has him study many different forms and styles, and they practice and practice until Obi-Wan can hardly stand, and still, there is so much more to learn, and his master. He never belittles him, never criticizes in any manner not meant to guide him into correction, but Obi-Wan cannot escape the thought that his master is disappointed in his skills, and that is why he has not chosen a specialty for Obi-Wan to focus his mastery on, that is why he is always trying to teach him a different way, a different style. Obi-Wan is still practicing Shai-Cho for Sith's sake. He practices it barehanded. He practices it with his blade, with the reverse grip, with 2 blades, with the 2-bladed reverse grip, with the staff, Shai-Cho, Makashi, Sarisu, Adaru, the beginnings of Gemso, and even Vapid, though his master and Master Windu only ever walk him through the forms, and not the practice in the Force. In their study of the Force, Obi-Wan feels failure keenly. He can enhance his senses, enhance the capabilities of his body. He's learning how to layer his shields, now that they are properly anchored within his mind, building on skills learned in the crash, but he fails phenomenally in such simple ways. He could break shackles through blunt use of the Force, but was defeated when his master placed a simple bowl of sand in front of him and asked him to lift and separate all the grains. Obi-Wan could lift the bowl, or the pile, could swirl it through the air's mass, but his master did not want him to do that. One by one, Padawan, his master had asked, wrap yourself around each grain distinctly, until you know every individual facet of every single piece, and can move and direct them independently. Obi-Wan could lift a grain of sand, 5, a dozen, but hundreds, thousands. His focus fell apart, and his grasp, his control, dissolved right along with it. It was stupid. He was stupid. It was just sand. Obi-Wan tells himself to focus on the here and now, and moves to reignite his sabers, only for his master to hold up a hand, stalling him. Obi-Wan looks up curiously, and then tracks his gaze to the entrance of the cell as it chimes and opens. Good afternoon, Master Ben greets, and Obi-Wan pinches his lips, frowning. Vant, Siri, Sean, Sui, and Quinlan were all hovering on the threshold, Siri jerking an elbow into Quinlan's side, Quinlan shoving her back, Sean shoving them both apart, and Bant sighing deeply. Master Ben, may we watch you and Obi-Wan train, please? The pink Mon Calamari Padawan asks, shooting Obi-Wan an apologetic look. No, Master Ben replies, earning the same affronted look from all the teen and twinklings, except Obi-Wan, whose ears turned red in embarrassment. His master rather didn't like anyone watching Obi-Wan train, and that was humiliating. Master Ben never said anything, of course, but if Obi-Wan were better, surely his master would have him sparring with other Padawans. You may, however, join in on the lesson, Master Ben adds, and all of Obi-Wan's friends gape. Oh, Criff, yeah. Quinlan pushes forward, Sean Jisel right beside him, an eager look on her face. What lesson, Master Naasade? Sui Choi asks, dwarfed by his taller companions, but unafflicted by it. Master Naasade smiles slowly. It's not a wise smile, or an obvious one, but is victorious in his own right, as if by taking a single step, they have already lost against him. How to defend yourself from what is behind you. Partner up. The Padawans and initiates hesitate, with the exception of Bant, who darts right over to Obi-Wan, claiming him. Siri partners with Sean, eyeing the taller girl with some curiosity, and Sui partners with Quinlan, who looks perplexed by his tiny counterpart. Now I want you to all face your partners, a blade swing apart, Master Ben instructs, and they shuffle, bumping off of each other, to comply. In both directions, Quinlan, Siri, he adds, and they scoot farther away from each other so as not to accidentally catch the other in the side. Obi-Wan sees his master fetch the blaster droids, and wipes the sweat off his brow from an already intensive afternoon with a sigh of resignation. His master releases 8 of them. This is also a cooperative exercise. You are to keep your eyes on your partner. You can see what is behind them, but they cannot, and they must defend themselves. How can you still help? He asks. Call out to them. Siri blurts. You could, Master Ben nods. What else? Watch your partner's body language, Quinlan says. Master Ben nods again. Good, but then you've been in the field, Padawan vows. Trust in the Force, Sui adds. Always. Master Ben smiles, activating the droids. Now, keep in mind you are all doing all of this at the same time. Wait, what? The floating droids start firing, and lightsabers are hurriedly ignited. Not quick enough, someone yelps. Chapter 5. Padawan, what happened to you? Tal stands over the pink-skinned Mon Calamari girl, who was struggling to apply a slave to a liberal spray of sting marks across her arms, her back, her legs. Master Naasade invited us to join in Obi-Wan's training session. Bant replies, blinking widely up at her master, who was not fooled by the innocent look in the least. Bant was caring and gentle, but never, ever was she that naive. Training session, Tal repeats flatly. Against what? An army. Padawan, look at you. She steps forward and takes the tube of salve, assisting her Padawan with the harder-to-reach spots. It was a difficult lesson, Bant says, jerking ticklishly when Tal applies salve to a sting very near her gills. But it was. She trails off, hesitating, and Tal is baffled at the slight sense of guilt she can feel from the girl. Bant, Tal inquired softly, letting her shields relax so that her own calm might pervade her empathetic Padawan, and so that Bant could feel the care and trust Tal felt for her. It was nothing like how we train, Master, Bant says in a rush. There were so many elements, and in the moment it was rather overwhelming but the more I think about it, the more I study what we did and what we could have done and what I might be able to make work, Master. I'll be learning from that lesson for weeks. Tal pauses, surprised. You like learning from Master Naasade? Her Padawan had been distraught when such dramatic change came over Obi-Wan following his acceptance as a Padawan learner. He'd almost completely disappeared from his friends' lives, and when they did see him, he was exhausted and wincing. Bant had had nothing good to say about his master, often cursing the way he treated her friend. From her usually gentle Padawan, it had raised quite a few alarms for Tal. Well, he's not you, Bant says emphatically. But it was a good training session. I think it will help me a lot. If Obi-Wan's training sessions are always like that, it's intense, but I can see why he doesn't regret his master. Tal studies her Padawan's face, Bant nervously fidgeting. Master, there is much about Master Naasade that troubles me, Bant. Tal informs the girl, admiring her maturity and humility with pride. But perhaps that is merely because there is much I have to learn of him, and much I may never learn about our mysterious former shadow. Oh, Bant says softly. Let this be a lesson, Padawan mine. Even the most observant of us can make hasty judgments, Tal says, lifting one finger to tap off the dome of her Padawan's head. Bant goes cross-eyed, and then blinks irritably. But she also smiles. I'll remember that, Master Tal. Factly. Master Lalarayo is a Wookiee in the 3rd decade of her 2nd century. She has been a Jedi Master for half that span, and a Creche Master for 106 years. She has raised 7 clans from infancy to adolescence, and not once has she ever questioned her capability as a teacher, a guide, even as a foster parent, though there were Jedi who scowled to claim their roles as such. Not once until now. Master Lalarayo, Master Buna, an aging Duros with green skin, and the Master of the Creche, prompts her as she stands before the complete Initiates Council. My apologies, Masters, Lalarayo rumbles softly. I am at a loss, she states simply. As are we. The Duros lifts a wry brow, his red eyes slightly clouded with his age, but his wits ever sharp. We shall find our way together, he says kindly, and she trills appreciatively and gathers her thoughts so that she may present them clearly. Masters, as you know, I am responsible at present for Hawkback Clan, she begins. 3 months ago, of my 8 initiates I had 2 with the potential to become knights, 2 who were healer or metacorps bound, 1 for the Edu Corps, and 3 as of yet undecided paths. They are not even yet quite old enough to even be eligible for apprenticeship, let alone to send off to the corps, she adds. But one learns to see the path that stretches before them. Several of the counselors nod, understanding her meaning. They watched so many children walk so many similar paths, after all. You learned how to tell earlier and earlier which direction they were heading. Some would always surprise you, however, most fit a certain mold, and were guided to where their talents and personality would be best suited. All of them show no doubts as to their futures, and accepted these roles, she says, and it was an accomplishment to know she could raise them and not disappoint them by building up hopes of a life that would not suit them, by showing them the way that would serve them best, by raising them to find joy in their work. Today I stand before you and I can only say, Lalarayo snorts softly through her nose, laughing at her own folly, and struggling with deep inner turmoil, that I now have 1 future Creche Master and 7 potential shadows. The council is not stunned by the pronouncement, not shocked. They are quiet, contemplative, and then surprise and alarm build in the room until the force buzzes with it. They felt hardly a fraction of what Lalarayo herself did when she had realized what had become of her clan, which she thought she knew and played so well. This is unprecedented, Master Lalarayo. This is, what? How? Master Buna inquires, deep lines drawn around his brows and eyes, already craggy with age. Part of it, Part of it, masters, is what Lady Shmi has taught them, Lalarael says. It had seemed remarkable when all her younglings had come one day from the gardens with a neat new trick, and it became less and less remarkable to see them flocking to the sharp-eyed woman who had so much to teach them in such different ways than the temple knew. And part of it is what Lady Shmi says to them. She taught them to hide, and she told them stories, and they, more than most others, have taken so much of it into themselves. Masters, my initiates accept that this may never be, that they may never be chosen, but counselors, I cannot. Her voice is a soft roar, and barely that by the standards of her species. There is so much potential in them, and I never saw it, I could not bring it forth, but knowing it now, how can we give them up? What do I do when I know they could be so much more? Lalarael asks, almost pleads. She had questioned herself, and when she had found no answers, she had braved to ask the young mother in question, ask her how she had seen what Lalarael of all her many years could not. Shmi had smiled and said, it is easier to find hidden things if you two are hiding. Lalarael had never felt more ignorant in her life than when she looked into the eyes of a woman barely a sliver of her own age and failed to understand the wisdom that waited there. What do we do? Lalarael asks again. Factly. 5. Obi-Wan protested. You have to admire their tenacity. Ben replies easily, amused at his Padawan's indignation. This was clearly an effort of some collaboration and cunning. They are the first, after all, who truly understood what was not written in the challenge rules. Why wasn't it written? Obi-Wan asked sharply, frowning up at his master. Precisely because I wanted to see who could put forth a little ingenuity, Padawan mine. Ben smiles, reaching out and tugging on Obi-Wan's Padawan braid. But I'm the one who gets stuck with whomever defeats you, master. Ah, I see. Ben gives Obi-Wan a lofty look. You think they'll beat me? Master, there are 5 of them. 5, yes, so you pointed out. Ben draws, and Obi-Wan flushes a little. And each a specialist of a different fighting style. They've even practiced working in tandem, which is an effort we'll have to admire. Fret less, Obi-Wan, he says, smirking when his Padawan glowers at him. They're only young knights. Master, Obi-Wan huffs, frowning uncertainly. You're confident? He asks. Not cocky? I know you're one of the best, master. He fidgets, and Ben's expression softens. You aren't losing me today, Padawan, and certainly not to them, he promises. You don't think I'd ever let anyone near you who wasn't worthy, do you? Obi-Wan blushes bright red, and shakes his head. Well then, I suppose I ought to indulge them. Ben murmurs, glancing across the arena towards his team of opponents, who look very self-satisfied for not even having stepped into the circle yet. Ah, the folly of young authority. Graduating to knighthood has convinced them that they are ready to face all that comes before them. They still believe that they can accomplish anything simply because they wish to. They are Jedi, after all. Ben was knighted knowing that this was not true. They had certainly not dared to underestimate him, at least. Their team comprised of a variety of species, as well as specialties, hoping that the incongruity might thwart him. Gentle beings, shall we? Ben calls, thinking that perhaps his Padawan was right about his attitude today. He sounded rather full of himself. They nod respectfully and move into the sparring circle, making their first mistake by flanking each other instead of surrounding him, courtesy of a duel of no. The audience murmurs softly, a thrill of excitement and anticipation in the room threaded with less pleasant sensations, pride, aggression, jealousy. Those who are hoping Ben will fail here only for the sake of seeing him fail. How utterly he is going to disappoint them. They try to disperse as soon as the match starts, but Ben is already moving, closing the gap before they have even cleared each other. The Adaru specialist leaps clear, and their Sarisu fighter slides past him, but the other 3 are not so lucky. 2 come off with minor sears, but the 3rd is felled and forced to leave the ring. There are too many lightsabers in the circle. Their reaches overlap, and so Ben does what he is not expected to do and disengages his own. He is not Jango Fett, who kills 6 Jedi Knights with his bare hands in a fit of vengeance, but he has enough Mandalorian training to best foreign a spar without a blade in his hands, particularly when they have to defeat themselves. It is simply not the Jedi way to engage a single opponent with so many. By the time he has relieved them of their blades, his Padawan is grinning ear to ear. Chapter 6. In enterprising match, Master Naasade, Healer Nihila congratulates him, striding over with dry cynicism. And when I endured unscathed, Ben comments, eyeing the healer, who waves a hand in negation. As unscathed as you ever are, she comments, giving him a stern look. Ben would apologize, but it is hardly his fault that the empath is subject to his emotions. He can't stop being what he is any more than she can. Instead, he merely tips his head, conceding the point. I'm merely here to let you know that another match was slated for today. Rather last minute, she says, sounding so very reproving. Oh, Ben inquires, a bit snippily. I can't spend all my time on these challenges. And haven't they realized I can't be exhausted into defeat? They probably have, Nihila replies. But given the givens, it should be short. How flattering. Ben smiles warmly at her. Isn't it just? She smiles back cheerfully, and Ben only has enough time to tense before she has grabbed hold of him, with her hand and with the force, and the hypo spray is jabbed into his neck. He throws her with a rough push on instinct. He may or may not apologize for that later, and staggers back, trying to purge the drug from his system even as everything seems to melt, all the colors hyper bright, and wavering like water. Well, this is, he stumbles, and then laughs as the euphoria rushes through him, distracting his concentration, the force slipping out of his grasp. New. He collapses to his knees not entirely of his own doing. Nihila is a mirage of pink and violet as she walks back towards him. Call it payback for that spice overdose your Padawan was subjected to, she says, stopping just out of reach. You already. If Ben finished that sentence, he never remembers doing so. Factily. Sean watches Obi-Wan climb up the tree to join her with a little amusement and a lot of melancholy. She's only got 4 months left in the temple, and so whenever she can, she is trying to soak in the things about her childhood home that she will miss the most, hoping that if she imprints them deeply enough within herself, they might never truly leave her. Her perch in this tree above the long creek is one of the places she'll miss the most, while Obi-Wan, for all she's only known him for a few months, is one of the people she'll miss most. He's not as quick up the tree as she is, and he takes more care of his hands. Humans have softer skin than Deveronians, after all. The tree has thorns, which deters most younglings from the climb, but the view is rewarding, and the smell of the blossom buds is soothing. Is this your planetarium? He asks, once he's cleared the lower branches. When I need solace, I sometimes go up to the planetarium and sit in the star chart holograms, Obi-Wan says. I haven't much, lately, but before Master Ben chose me, I spent a lot of time there. Yeah, Sean replies, feeling a warmth lift her up at the sheer knowledge that here is someone who completely understands. How are things with Master Nihila? She asks. Obi-Wan looks a little less exhausted than usual, but far more frazzled. The point of this challenge was supposed to be to save me from Master Ben's tyranny, Obi-Wan deadpans. Master Hila is worse. Healers are crazy. That's the general assumption, Sean quips, and Obi-Wan cracks a smile. Can I borrow you for a few minutes, or do you want to be here for a little while more? Obi-Wan asks, swinging his feet much as she had been doing. Borrow me for what? Sean inquires, because as much as she liked Master Ben's training session, the knowledge that it would be both one of her first and her last had hurt in a way that still ached, and she had no interest in being the dummy in a healer's lesson. Oh, my master and I are setting up an ambush, Obi-Wan shrugs. Our prey is being very difficult. Sean eyes him suspiciously. I can't tell if that means there's a loth cat loose in the temple, or if the council will be reprimanding us all later. Us. Obi-Wan's eyes gleam. Sean smiles and shoves him with one hand, though he catches himself easily. Of course us. I want to have as many memories as I can. Spectacular. Obi-Wan grins and hops forward, letting himself just drop from the tree. What does that word even mean? Sean mutters, daring herself to follow in as effortless a manner. The tree is her tree, but it still has thorns. Obi-Wan takes her hand when she finally scrambles down, not having had the guts to jump, and they dart out of the gardens under a few reproving stares, nearly crashing into Master Windu as they spring around the corner in the outer corridor. Sorry. Sean yelps, and Obi-Wan just calls back. Blame my master. I do. Master Windu snaps after them. There are all sorts of suites and chambers within the temple, dotted on various levels, and in odd and ends places, meant to provide a refuge no matter where you found yourself at your time of need. They made study rooms, or meeting places, good places to sit and draw, or play an instrument, tea rooms, or, on occasion, an excellent setting for sabbath. Sean has never been to the room Obi-Wan takes her. She's never even been on this level within the temple, but it overlooks Coruscant opposite the Senate Dome, which left streams of traffic, the yacht shining spire, and the distant spark of generator fields flashing like an unending storm. The walls that are not consumed by the window are painted in abstract, soothing murals, and there is a round table surrounded by low, comfy couches. Inside, Master Naasade and who she thinks is Master Jen are glaring at each other from across said table, cards in hand, tea steaming between them. Unethical, Jen grinds out. Hardly, Naasade rolls his eyes and spies Obi-Wan and Sean. Ah, there you are. He has bet your apprenticeship in a card game, Qui-Gon informs Obi-Wan, who blinks several times, brows rising. Sean frowns at his back, because he doesn't feel surprised at all. My master is an excellent player. I'm sure he'll emerge victorious, Obi-Wan says placidly. He's losing, Qui-Gon retorts. Am I? Master Naasade frowns, and Sean has no idea what is going on. No. It appears he lays his cards on the table, and Master Jen, who has taken a sip of tea, spits. You cheat. He gapes, rising from his seat and slapping a hand down on the cards revealed. Why, Master Qui-Gon, there are younglings present, Master Naasade all but purrs. Such an accusation is serious. Your proof? He inquires. I'm not a youngling. Sean complains, Obi-Wan's voice a twin to her own. Master Naasade sends them an indulgent smile, the same smile he gave them when they so eagerly jumped into his training lesson. My apologies, he murmurs, and Obi-Wan turns to Sean so his master can't see him roll his eyes. But I have no Padawan. Qui-Gon protests. Then perhaps you should not have been so certain of your victory that you accepted a bet you could not pay up, Master Naasade says, airily, clearly to amuse for his own good. Whatever shall I do with that debt of yours, Master Jen? Master Jen colors, shooting the two of them an uncomfortable look. I had hoped to alleviate your Padawan of his difficult training regimen, as all the rest of the temple aspires to do. Forgive my altruism. Hard to do, when you just blatantly insulted my capabilities as a teacher, Master Naasade deadpans, and Sean finds him eerily similar to Obi-Wan in that moment. Or perhaps the other way around. Shall we call it good faith, Master Naasade? Jen inquires, having resumed his seat stiffly. No, Naasade says, humor fading into something sharper. The last time we spoke, I made a request of you which you have failed to heed. Master Jen's expression turns white, and a shadow seems to enter the room, heavy and oppressive. Sean squeezes Obi-Wan's hand for comfort, and he leans into her shoulder. You made a few spurious claims and expected me to simply. 10 years you have wallowed in this, Master Naasade retorts. And there was nothing spurious about the things I had to say to you, Qui-Gon Jinn. They resume glaring at each other. How do you ever know? Jin breaks after a few minutes of tense, awkward silence. I can't fail again, I could not. Bear it. Master Naasade finishes for him. Then don't fail again. You never know, Master Jin. That doesn't excuse us from trying. Master Jen frowns deeply at the other man, and then levels Sean with a heavy, troubled look. She sucks in a breath, holding very still, and then shakes herself for having felt afraid. There was nothing to be afraid of. Without knowing why, she squeezes Obi-Wan's hand and steps forward, holding herself with the certainty of one who has accepted their path, even if it wasn't to go where their heart wished to lead them. Initiate Sean Jeezel, Master Jen. She bows lightly. Do you need help? Is that why I'm here? He blinks once, and then a second time, and the look in his eyes softens. Perhaps, he murmurs. He looks shaken, and Sean takes another step forward with an encouraging look from Master Naasade. What can I do? Chapter 7. Chemistry 3, and Human and Near-Human Anatomy, and Physiology 2. Obi-Wan frowns at the datapad in his hands, and then frowns at the pink-skinned Zeltron giving him an unimpressed look. Master Nihila, I don't think you can enroll me in these courses. You're only my master for a couple more weeks. The key point there, sweet Obi-Wan, would be master, the healer replies. You had decent grades in your first 2 courses of chemistry, and you tested into A and P2 with good marks. Furthermore, you missed the fact, dear interim Padawan, that I can and have already enrolled you. Obi-Wan's frown sharpens into a scowl, realizing that she slipped a placement exam past his nose amidst all her other rigorous knowledge assessments and mentor-assigned homework quizzes. It's a lot, Master Healer. I don't know if I can keep up, he admits pitifully. The healer softens slightly, laying a hand on his shoulder. Obi-Wan, there is more to a Jedi than their skill with the sword or spoken word. You have power, Padawan, and you can do so much more with it than you know. Healing is just one of those arts. It isn't a kind one, or an easy one, but you can do so much good with a little more learning. I can't train you to be a standard medic, Obi-Wan, and you've come along on that front beautifully. But if you take these courses, I can train you to be so much more effective than that. Obi-Wan blushes a little, but mostly he just feels nervous, his stomach clenching. You're talking about real force healing. Master Healer, I'm not capable of that. I can't even master my stupid sand exercise. She gives him a puzzled look and then shakes her head. Do you think I am lying to you, Obi-Wan? She asks. No. She gives him a dry look, and he winces. Trust my instincts, Obi-Wan, if you can't trust your own, she tells him. A healing master knows how to recognize those with the focus and power to become healers themselves. Jedi healers are few and far between, and we cannot waste years on an apprentice incapable of attuning themselves to the art. I knew Esther had it, just as I know you do. Though, she pauses thoughtfully, looking him over. I don't think you used to. You've grown in ways you can hardly imagine, Padawan Kenobi, sand or no sand. Obi-Wan blushes more deeply, and nods humbly, going to the healer, who cuffs him over the ear to straighten him back out. If you're so concerned over the added coursework, she says, perhaps you could try getting that history project of yours out of the way. I am working on it, Master Healer, Obi-Wan promises. Factually. What truly marvels Shakti about her chosen Padawan is that Shmi Skywalker is not tempted by darkness, not at all, not even once. When they meditate together, sequestered in the enclosure of curtains within their chambers, palms laid over one another, and let their souls open up to each other, Shakti finds lifetimes of suffering, finds unmitigated cruelty and pain, pressed against the essence that is Shmi Skywalker, like watermarks on silk. She finds the passion of a revolutionary, the sorrow of a lost girl, and then a lost woman, the justified rage of a righteous cause, and hate. Shakti knows of hate only as the miasma of darkness. In her experience, hatred is the enemy. It is your destruction and the destruction of all you hold dear. Shmi, Shakti barely touched the surface, and still, that hatred lanced across her mind like a storm. Shmi carried it in her heart and in her bones. It warmed her blood and steadied her breath and strengthened her muscles. It whispered to her while she slept, while she ate, while she brushed her son's hair, while she studied, soothing her thoughts and sharpening her instincts. Shmi Skywalker was shaped by her hatred, and still not once was tempted by darkness. She felt it, certainly, but if darkness was a stream, then Shmi waded through the current and kept on walking until the waters passed her by, never even bothered enough to glance down. It flew in the face of everything Shak was ever taught. And yet, even knowing this, even having spent hours upon hours meditating around the concept and quietly clinging to the shaky ground of her former bedrock, Shak had not had the foresight to realize that wise, gentle, sharp-eyed, hateful Shmi Skywalker was completely capable of violence. Shakti had put a saber in her hand and not once considered that Shmi had never had a fight in her life where a draw was the desired outcome. Her instincts would not tell her to win. They told her to survive, and to survive, as she had, meant to go for the kill. Shmi. Shak reprimands sharply, and her Padawan startles, Night Davil looking incredibly relieved as she steps back away from him, allowing him to relax from his hasty defense of his throat. Even a training saber is not safe for someone to shove into your larynx. You are not trying to kill him. Am I not? Shmi inquires, brow pinched in confusion. You have given me a weapon. To defend yourself. To defeat him, yes. But it is not the Jedi way to dive straight into slaughter. There is a reason we are not merely equipped with blasters, Shmi, Shakti explains, feeling foolish for not having done so before. Shmi, for all she lacked any formal education, was incredibly brilliant in some regards, intelligent enough that she could teach any class on mechanics or mathematics, but shockingly ignorant in others. Shakti forgets too often that Shmi, who soaks serenity into her skin like a plant is solar rays, was raised in a world where peace was a foreign concept. I cannot beat him, Shmi replies. I have neither the skill nor the strength. Survival instincts, Shakti reminds herself. She was raised knowing that her life was not guaranteed to her. And Night Davil was Nardaper. He and Shmi had often spoke at length in private, and as Shakti was guided further along the path, he finally confided in her the title the Amavika had honored him with. It was a name out of a slave story from Zygeria, about a Dapur who walked under the sun and under the moon for many days and many nights to find Ekrith. The trickster tested them with monstrous forms and terrible illusions before finally appearing before them to hear why they sought Ekrith, they who had wronged our Amu, and the Amavika, and all the many stars in the sky. The story goes that the Dapur dropped to his knees and confessed to Ekrith that they had freed all their slaves and given away all their possessions, and wished only to be forgiven for all they had done, for the mother to rinse them clean of their sins, that they might do better in the next life. Ekrith denied them. This is the life you were given, and you will do with it whatever you can. It is not yet over. Like Aramu's sacred children, it is not yours to do with as you please. And the Dapur wept, but Ekrith had no pity, not even for the repentant. Then make use of my life. The Dapur cried, when Ekrith made to leave. Ekrith the trickster, use me as your disguise. I cannot give you my life for you will not take it, but I can give you my face. My face will be Ekrith's face, and with it, Ekrith may set others free. And Ekrith agreed, and this Dapur became Nardaper, one who binds and unbinds the chains of slavery. But Nardaper's face was still Dapur's face, and Night Davil was still a scion of Zygeria, and all its history, and its great empire of slavery. Shmi's mind would know better. Her heart might as well, but her instincts. She has so much to teach us, Shakti muses, and so much to learn. Not yet, Padawan, Shakti says with certainty. But you will. Chapter 8. Why are you looking up the temple? You live here. Siri Tachi says sharply, and Obi-Wan jerks, slamming his knee into the desk. Siri, he complains, glowering at the girl leaning over his shoulder. She grins unrepentantly at him, a wide and toothy smile. Gotcha, she beams, crystal blue eyes sparkling. But really, you never have any free time, and you're wasting it on this. She gestures to the computer terminal, and Obi-Wan takes a moment to process her accusation, because he's taken in her new haircut. A traditional Padawan cut was short and spiky, and not entirely dignified, and being Adi Gallia's Padawan, and therefore extremely visible as a representative of the Order, Siri had opted out. Instead, her hair was now trimmed in fine layers that fell close and neat around her eyes and cheeks, and ended in perfect alignment with her chin, with the exception of her Padawan braid, which she kept slightly longer. It made her look like a calmer, more graceful version of herself, and Obi-Wan grudgingly admitted that she was pretty, for all she seemed to enjoy irking him. I have free time every 10 days, Obi-Wan retorts, when his thoughts finally catch up. It's Siri's turn to roll her eyes. Every 10 days, she mocks. Obi, most Padawans have free time every day. Hence why everyone hates your master. They don't hate him, Obi-Wan replies mulishly. And you forgot half my name. Obi-Wan. Bant calls you Obi, Siri protests. She's called me that since we were in diapers, Siri. Obi-Wan groans. I can't make her stop. You think you can stop me? She lifts a brow, lips twitching, and then sighs petulantly when Obi-Wan glares at her. Her argument regarding his leisure time wasn't inaccurate, per se, but Obi-Wan still felt peevish when his friends pointed it out. Van understood the most, having been in his Kresh clan, but the others just didn't seem to get that Obi-Wan had tagged behind everyone else for years. His only advanced subject was languages, but in all other aspects, his age mates had far outstripped him, a fact which some never let him forget. He needed more time, had to put in more effort, just to keep up. That his master was so forgiving of the fact that Obi-Wan often slipped his homework deadlines or received mediocre grades was a miracle. If nothing else, Master Ben was a blessing for his patience. He never got irritated when Obi-Wan struggled, be it in his saber play, or his force techniques, or his coursework. Now that Obi-Wan wasn't collapsing into bed after every evening meal or struggling to rise in the morning, Master Ben spent those last few quiet hours of the day walking him through his homework and answering his questions, the ones Obi-Wan wouldn't dare ask the teacher in front of his class. It made things so much easier, and his master always seemed to know just the right way to explain things so that Obi-Wan could understand them when he so often felt lost in his regular lectures. So yes, he spent his mornings in classes and his afternoons in training and his evenings studying, but for the first time since he was graduated from the creche to the initiate dorms, he felt like he wasn't failing as a Jedi. Most days, anyway. I'm working on my history project, Obi-Wan finally answers her question. You're studying the temple? Siri asks, leaning further over his shoulder to squint at the data on the screen. I'm studying a lot of temples, Obi-Wan replies. Every temple within the last millennia. Which was a nightmare. He thought finding the right temples to fit his time frame was difficult, but collating the data on the Jedi who served those temples he had to do almost entirely by hand. Honestly, it was almost as if someone had written the archive algorithms to specifically make his research project as difficult as essentially possible. Yikes. Siri makes a face. Sounds dull. Some of it's actually fascinating, Obi-Wan remarks. There was one temple, a completely radical sect, that dedicated itself to the study of time. They wanted to see if they could move through time by completely releasing themselves into the Force. Did they? Siri asks, intrigued. No idea, Obi-Wan shrugs. I couldn't even find out where the temple was. All I found was a missing in action report which verified that the temple did exist, and that the 29 Jedi who studied there just vanished. Creepy, Siri deadpans. What about the rest of it? Obi-Wan opens his mouth and hesitates, sheets and sheets of flimsoplast scattered around his terminal that are beginning to lead to something he feels. He doesn't know what he feels. He hasn't made sense of it yet. He just knows that whatever it is important. It's going to mean something. My master does nothing without purpose, Obi-Wan knows. He also knows that Master Ben gets a look in his eye when he asks Obi-Wan how this project is going. Like he knows something, but he's just waiting for Obi-Wan to confirm it, which is a lot of pressure, but at the same time. He trusts me. I haven't decided yet, Obi-Wan equivocates, to Siri's pinched brow consternation. Factually, you do not get to step into this office unless you are decontaminated, Nihila snaps when his shadow darkens her doorway, not even looking up from the tightly controlled chaos of her desk. Across the room, Healer Vakra, in a similar state of manic focus, twitches a leg in agreement. I am as sterile as it is possible for me to be, Ben draws somewhat snippily. Your Padawan thoroughly saw to that. Nihila grunts, and Healer Che clicks her tongue. Find me whichever Shavit Hundan brought this virus back to the temple, Master Naasade, and I will listen to your complaints. I have 67 initiates and 12 knights currently spewing fluids and crying in misery. I'm aware of that, actually, Ben remarks softly, and Nihila looks up sharply, pinning him with a violet, bloodshot stare. I think my, sock drawer in the trash compactor might be of some service there, he says. What did I just hear come out of your mouth? Vakarache asks, looking thoroughly disturbed. You're what? Don't mind his idiocy, Voka. Nihila waves a hand, already rising and moving towards Ben. Are you sure? She asks. No, Ben says, but I am hopeful. From what I've been told, the symptoms closely resemble something I picked up in the Meridian sector. Years ago, he adds, when Vakarache shoots him a venomous look of rising fury. I promise you I did not carry it into the temple. The Twi'lek healer nods and returns to her work, switching slides in an analyzer and bending to inspect the readouts. Right? Healer nods. Follow me. Ben does, staying in her shadow as they slip through the bustle and harmonic chaos of a full healing ward and into a small examination room. Nihila and a droid immediately set to work to draw a biological sample to analyze, and Ben hardly even notices the blood being drawn. If this turns out to be the same, you should tell me how you contracted the virus, Nihila says. To be honest, I don't remember, Ben replies. My life at the time was demanding. I only ever paused to acknowledge I was sick when I could no longer perform my duties, much to the aggravation of my colleagues. Ben corrects himself just in time, almost having said my troops. They rather wished I would learn to rest more, or at least report more expediently to medical, which was hypocritical of them. A sentiment this entire temple shares, Master Naasade, she remarks dryly. It seems you've yet retained that habit. I recently slept quite well, actually. Ben's lips twitch. The most peaceful 12 hours of sleep I've gotten in years. What did you give me? Not a sedative. Nihila slows her movements, looking away from the analyzer to peer contemplatively at him. She looks worried. How do you feel? There weren't any lasting adverse effects. Overall, I'd say the experience was quite pleasant. I do trust you not to poison me, Master Healer. He smiles. That is not what I asked, she says, and Ben frowns inquisitively. I'm not sure what you want me to say, he tells her. I feel fine. Ben. Oh dear. When was the last time you felt happy? She asks. I find joy where I can, Ben replies, eyeing him. You do, she agrees. But that isn't happiness. Hells, that isn't even contentment. Ben, do you know what I feel every time you walk into the room? I'd rather not, he sighs. You feel like a bruise. A deep dull ache that flares and fades and never goes away, and that's when you're calm, she says. You hurt, do you understand that? I can feel it, and it hurts. It wasn't a sedative, Ben remarks. It was a mood enhancer. I tailored it especially to your neurochemical panel. I figured you would spend an evening relaxed and giggling, and instead you immediately passed out and remained unconscious for 12 hours. Another 2 and I would have had to declare a coma and spent 6 months on suspension for egregious misuse of authority. I assured Chief Healer Korup that I did not find your actions to be in violation of your ethics, and that while your methods were unorthodox I could not and would not claim to have been harmed by them, Ben says. For which I am grateful, Nihila nods in respect. But the fact remains that your response was frightening, Ben. I can't help what my experiences have made of me, Nihila. A soul healer might be able to. And I cannot share them, Ben adds firmly, irrevocably. And you cannot force me to so long as I remain rational and in full possession of my senses, which you cannot claim I am not. And I do not want to, Nihila says, just as firmly. I only want to help you, Master Naasade. I am not your enemy. Ben smiles faintly. If I considered you an enemy, Master Healer, I would not have let you abscond with my Padawan. How is he doing, by the way? Let me. Bold claim, she says dryly, and then reconsiders. If he had seen her as an enemy, she would never have been allowed so close so freely. He's doing well, though he frets over his own progress more than he should. Does he not know how remarkable he is? Only through dedication, Ben says. That's precisely what I'm talking about, the Zeltron expresses, turning back to the analyzer to parse through strands of genetic and semi-genetic coding, looking for the markers of the virus's own code. He'll admit to his own shortcomings, but he never allows them to deny him the attempt. Do you know how many of us, not just students, but even some masters, who will turn away from so much simply because they think it is outside what they are capable of? Do or do not, Ben replies bitterly. There is no try. Yes, I know exactly how often the Jedi will simply do not. Nihila grimaces slightly, and Ben reminds himself to mellow his feelings, for her sake. I am proud of him, Ben says. Perhaps you should tell him that more often, she says in soft chastisement. He certainly deserves the praise. I try, Ben says, hesitating. There are moments upon moments when he can feel nothing but a warm glow of pride and joy for what Obi-Wan accomplishes, but too often he chokes on the words for the memory of his own failures that shadow his Padawan's every accomplishment. Obi-Wan is succeeding, but all Ben can remember is where he failed, and it is that double-life dichotomy that strangles him even when he knows his Padawan deserves better. I try, Ben repeats. Chapter 9. Obi-Wan, what are you doing? He doesn't so much as look up, and Tal is simply bemused. Should you not be with your master at this time? Tal inquires, though to be fair she's secretly pleased he isn't, which is unvirtuous enough that it is probably something she should meditate on. M.N., Obi-Wan hums, and now Tal is, still bemused. The boy has overtaken several data terminals and dragged over an additional desk. The desk is littered with layers of flimsoplast that he is currently scouring and marking with a vibrant orange ink, circling several selections and making small notations in the margins that draw the archivist in Tal to the surface, luring her closer. He won't mind, Obi-Wan mutters. Has he pushed you to neglect your studies in favor of his training? This looks rough, Tal inquires, trying to read the plast upside down, which is easy for an archivist and exceedingly difficult for anyone unfamiliar with the Kayakian monkey lizard scratch that was this Padawan shorthand. Not in the least, Obi-Wan retorts with a tone Tal is quickly becoming familiar with. Padawan Kenobi, it seems, is losing patience with those who besmirch his master's honor. Padawan Kenobi, like his master, gets snippy when he's short on patience. Then, what is this? Tal asks again, admittedly surprised to see the boy deviating from his master's regimen without permission. My master assigned me a history project. He looks up, if only to scowl at Tal's hand as it reaches for one of the plasts. Oh, she prompts, fingers twitching as she retracts the offending hand. I think I finally figured out why, he says. One would hope you'd understand that from the start, Padawan, Tal teases. He turns his scowl from her hand and lifts it up to her. That isn't what I meant at all, he says. Factually, Qui-Gon Jinn is at a loss. He has been quite neatly duped into a situation which has left him floundering, and he has not felt so awkward nor uncertain since his Padawan days. Say nothing else of Master Yanduku if not this. He instilled within all his students a sense of dignity. Luckily, his new Padawan did not seem to suffer the same lack of self-assurance. Do you like it? Sean asks, looking up at him with iridescent blue eyes and a reserved smile, radiating pleasure in the Force. Qui-Gon honestly does not know what to say. She was a perfectly self-sufficient youngling, if nothing else, and had wasted no time upon accepting to be his Padawan and moving into his quarters, trading her initiate whites for Padawan tunics, and getting her ident and passcodes updated. She even made sure she was already registered in the Temple net as the Padawan of Master Qui-Gon Jinn. And she had gone to get a haircut, apparently. It was not a traditional Padawan cut by any means, nor a traditional cut of any sort. This morning, his Padawan had had hair long enough to brush her lower back. Now, the sides of her head were shaved down to a fuzz. Save her Padawan braid, she had a chin-length fringe parted to either side, and what remained in the center was braided up and back into a single brown and white tail. I will say it suits you, Qui-Gon recovered, feeling slightly trapped by the sheen in her gaze. She blinks softly and then smiles with confidence. Good. She bounces and then turns and dashes into the kitchenette. I'll make tea, she calls back, and Qui-Gon has the feeling he's being rewarded for having selected a correct response. Force help me, he mutters, lifting a hand to press against his temple. Factually, for such a self-contained man, Ben reflects. Plo Koon is both a shockingly bold and cunningly radical son of a Sith spawn. To be perfectly honest, he had caught Ben completely by surprise. Ben had been aware that something underhanded was about when the Keldor Master strode opposite him in the arena, and several other Keldor Knights discreetly placed themselves at intervals around the sparring circle pillars among the shifting observers. The Keldor had the natural advantages of height and weight, as well as 2 decades more experience. There had always been a grace around the older master that Ben admired, a passive attunement to the Force that eluded most Jedi and hedged against the Order's tenets on inappropriate use. Ben had been expecting a fight, perhaps one of the few real fights he'd get in this present time. Plo Koon was not a showman, and even during the war he'd played his skills close to the vest, but Ben had always known the master to be one of the best. Ben draws in a sharp, instinctively terrified breath when his ears pop in a horribly familiar manner, and the burning flash of green that bursts out of Plo Koon's body surprises him in extremis. For a heartbeat, his instincts fail him. Ben does not move to catch the lightning on his saber and ground it. He has not done that in nearly 5 years. On Tatooine, his part of the wastes was subject to clear sky lightning, and every sandstorm carried charge. Ben had taught himself to do more than defend. He had taught himself to channel and redirect that energy, and that is what his instincts tell him to do now. Except, he is not on the open desert. He is in a crowded arena of equally shocked Jedi, and has nowhere to aim. Horrified for the both of them, Ben slings the energy right back at Plo. To his relief, the other master catches it on his blade, and another Keldor Knight, Sha Koon, the master's niece, steps forward, and together they ground the energy, which snaps and crackles in spite of being disconnected from Master Koon until they probably disperse it, a rippling wave of static buzzing along the floor and winking out. Ben is mesmerized. He has faced it lightning more times than he could count, and always it was a sickly purple energy, painful and draining, that sapped at the victim, and burned far worse than it should for how little damage it caused. It was also only effective so long as the Sith could concentrate, pulsing from their hands and fueled from within. This was nothing like that, and that was terrifying in its own right. Keldor have a natural affinity for electrical discharge, Master Naasade, Master Koon calls through his mask. Dora is riven with atmospheric storms, and we are well adapted, he explains, and in his explanation asks a silent and poignant question. Where does your affinity come from? Yet I am still surprised Master Yoda allowed you to perform such a feat indoors, Master Koon, Ben says. Ask permission, he did not. Yoda grumbles, appearing at the edge of the circle, silver hair standing on end. Forbid it, I would have. Forbid it, I still might. All necessary precautions were taken, Koon says, negating any apologetic implications as he gestures to his kinsmen around the circle. HRMGPH. Yoda grumbles disapprovingly. And if I had aimed for the ceiling? Ben retorts hotly. Or the floor? 2 powerful Jedi Masters made neat poles for that much energy to bounce between, but fully directed, or poorly unleashed, it would have torn through stone and utilities and people to devastating effect. Master Naasade, Plo Koon offers him his fully and utmost attention. I did not even suspect you could aim it at all. Emerald lightning is a Keldorian technique. Ben stares back at the master, who sits on the council, and knows where, when, he has come from, and holds the hints of why. Plo Koon nods in solemn recognition, an insight confirmed, and bows out of the challenge. Impressive as it may have seemed, the counselor admits, it is an incredibly draining technique. Generally, it is what one refers to as a finishing move. Generally, Ben agrees pointedly. Now he knows why the Wolfpack was such a tight-lipped and righteously overprotective platoon. Commander Wolf had been no different than Cody, standing the long watch while Ben sought solace, or was laid out in medical. No different than Rex, acting ahead of orders on sheer instinct and dumb luck, leaping without looking because Anakin was just ahead or just behind. They loved us, he knows, as he knew it once before. That wasn't a lie, and that made it worse. Chapter 10. You are loitering, Adi Gallia accuses, frowning sharply at the human master before her. Beside her, or just behind, her new Padawan is flagging, worn down simply by trailing after Adi today, though stalwartly refusing to admit to fatigue. She would learn to overcome that. Eventually. Am I? Master Naasade inquires in that infuriatingly polite manner he carries. This is the 4th time I have seen you today, Master Naasade, and as of yet I have not a single explanation for your presence here. Adi says, so yes, as you are not conducting any sort of senatorial-related duties and appear to in fact just be wandering the halls, you are loitering. Or you are lost, she adds snidely, earning a twitch of his eyebrow. He HMMs and looks past her, down at Padawan Tachi, who is drooping. Are you tired, Night Gallia? He inquires, lifting his gaze back up to her when she bristles at him for peering at her Padawan, which is a childishly jealous response she really needs to overcome, protective instincts or not. Heavens of light above, no one had warned her about the ferocity of protective instinct that came with claiming a Padawan. She nearly shoved Senator Orn Freta for standing too close to Siri this morning, not to mention how she'd almost reached out and snapped the wrist of one of the Mun Junior senators for shaking her hand. No, Adi replies stubbornly. I find that intriguing, he says, and Adi can feel her awareness unspool around her, her senses sharpen for danger, just because of the lilt of his voice and the look in his eyes when he says that. Why? She bites the bait. Just something I noticed during the Ryler 4 crisis that has finally formed into a coherent thought. How long would you say we were in the Senate Dome during that incident? He inquires. Adi has to search her memory, that event already buried beneath the monolith of follow-on duties, and incidents since then which she has fielded for the Jedi. 30 hours or so, she answers him. 30 hours or so, he repeats. And you don't find it odd that there was not a single master among us, aside from yourself, who was not nearly unconscious on their feet by the end of it. I myself was so flagged that I required a rest. Master Jin fell asleep where he sat, Master Fisto fell asleep standing up, and yet, we were only here perhaps 30 hours or so. Dealing with politics is a trying affair, Master Naasade, Adi says dismissively, for which many have not the wherewithal. It is mentally exhausting, and Jedi are more susceptible to that than most. Of that I have no contest nor doubt, Night Gallia, he accedes, which makes her feel even more suspicious. But so is a 3-day mediation, and most initiates endure that right by the time they are 9. Adi frowns. What point are you trying to make, Master Naasade? She asks directly. Part of her enduring dislike of this man is that he is a riddle wrapped in an illusion, and every interaction with him feels like a test. Politicians are less trying on her nerves. That I have done nothing whatsoever today except walk around these halls, and have a few conversations with those here whom I might call friends, and yet I feel just as exhausted as if I had just spent the 10-day on the battlefield, he says, and Adi feels a chill ripple across her skin even before he asks her directly, do you not find that to seem unnatural? Adi glances down at Siri, who is frowning sharply and stubbornly attempting to look not tired. I hadn't noticed, Adi admits, feeling worse. A credit to your excellent shielding technique, Night Gallia. Consciously or unconsciously, you've learned how to protect yourself from that effect, whatever it may be, he says, almost warmly. But others are less fortunate. You think it's deliberate, Adi says sharply, feeling a warning creep at the edges of her senses, though the Force itself feels. Adi shudders, wanting to run from this place, or scratch and peel at her skin. The Force feels as it always does in the Senate, staticky and numbing, full of white noise and frustration. Her master had told her that that was normal, just as Adi had told Siri. I think, he says carefully, that Jedi are discouraged by the sensation. Discouraged. How quaintly put, Adi thinks angrily, remembering every one of 1,000 incidents where other Jedi rebuffed joining her efforts in the Senate, passing off smaller tasks and duties to her to avoid the dome when they could so easily have taken care of it themselves. She had not minded, it was her responsibility to liaise between the Order and the Senate after all, but it was lonely at times. She had had her master, at least, until he retired and returned to his homeworld to spend out his last few years. He passed in his sleep less than 2 years after her knighting. He was old, but not that old. They said stress shortened his life. I see, Audie says neutrally, though the look that passes between them is anything but. I don't, Ciri mutters under her breath. Master Naasade huffs a laugh and Audie rests a hand on the crown of her Padawan's head, earning an indignant look. I will explain it to you later, Padawan, Audie promises. But perhaps Master Naasade makes a point. We have had a long day, and we should go home. But you have to speak with, Ciri protests. It can wait, Audie says. Is it because of me? Ciri asks. I'm not tired. I can't keep up. Your work is important. Ciri, Audie says firmly, and the girl drops her gaze, though her jaw is still set tensely. Audie has to admit that her Padawan will never lack for sheer force of will. It was why Audie chose her after all. But stubbornness was still stubbornness, and one had to tend to it carefully. Factually, Obi-Wan paces the edges of the room, his body thrumming with energy and tension, and his mind hauntingly devoid of all coherent thought, slightly numb, in fact. He's been pacing for a while, actually. Hours. He paced and paced waiting for his master to return, and then, mortifyingly, all but threw a datapad and a pile of flimsoplast at the older man, and then continued pacing. His master didn't even chastise him for it, which made him angry, actually. Obi-Wan had finished his task, and the reward was no reward at all. And his master had, suspected, at least. Obi-Wan would have appreciated a warning. So he paces, and his master carefully reads through the report Obi-Wan has spent days ordering, reordering, and compiling into as concise and clean a dissemination as he could, occasionally sifting through the pile of flimsoplast to confirm the data his Padawan has produced. The quiet is deafening. Obi-Wan wants to explode, or go curl up under his comforter and never come out again. He wants to argue, and he wants to sit in silence, and instead, he paces, and his master reads. An incredibly thorough dissection of facts. Obi-Wan, his master finally comments, setting the datapad down and giving the agitated teen his full focus. Was it because you doubted your own conclusion, or because you wanted to vent the spite you felt for how directly it impacted your own life? Both, Obi-Wan snaps angrily, and then winces, scolding himself for the display. Ah, his master comments mildly. That's it, Obi-Wan demands. Master, you knew. How could? Why? I suspected, but I did not have this. He lifts Obi-Wan's report. There was much, so much, Padawan, I did not have. So much you can only put together after. That makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. Obi-Wan vents, and Master Ben offers him one of those sheepish, self-depreciating smiles. Through their bond, Obi-Wan can feel elusive glimpses of pain and guilt in a small thread of pride and sorrow directed at Obi-Wan himself. Someday, Padawan, I will explain everything, Master Ben promises, which does absolutely nothing to make Obi-Wan feel better. But today, are you ready? He asks. Ready. Obi-Wan repeats stupidly. To take this before the council, Master Ben says. Obi-Wan freezes mid-step, shocked and mortified at the idea of presenting himself before the High Council of the Jedi Order, but then there is Master Ben, looking at him like Obi-Wan was capable of everything. Then there was Shmi Skywalker, the Padawan forbidden from being a Padawan, and Shak Ti, who was all but outcast for claiming her anyway, and there was Obi-Wan, and what almost was. A sad story repeated over and forgotten. Yes. Obi-Wan nods. I can't take this before the council. I have to, he realizes, speaking aloud. Factually. Actually standing before a full session of the Jedi Council was exactly as terrifying as Obi-Wan had expected it to be, particularly when they are displeased that they have been called together first thing in the morning. Obi-Wan himself was nothing but jumping nerves and dark circles beneath his eyes after having been forced to spend a restless night waiting to be able to stand before them and speak. He hadn't slept at all, and eventually both he and his master had ended up side by side on the sofa, leaning into each other, and not saying a word as the shadows deepened, lay dark, and then lifted again. "Speak to us, you would, Padawan Kenobi," Master Yoda inquires, voice still slightly raspy with sleep. "I would, Master Yoda." Obi-Wan swallows tightly, and still spends a minute in stammered silence, gathering himself together. The air in the room is dry and clean, and the skyline is tinged with morning pink and blue. The Force is with him. Obi-Wan begins. "Masters, as you know, I have been pulled from my standard history course and placed on an assigned self-study. I am here to report what I have uncovered, as it bears great impact on the state of the Order today." His statement earns a few frown, and a few more displeased looks, in his master's direction, not his. Obi-Wan continues, as none of them protest or ask questions. "My master assigned me to study not the history of what the Jedi have done, but the history of how the Jedi have progressed since the last war with the Sith." Obi-Wan pauses, taking a careful breath and feeling the solid pillar of support that was his master standing just behind him. 1,000 years ago, more or less, the Jedi underwent what we now call the Rewritten Reformation. That was my beginning, so to speak, Obi-Wan explains. The Rewritten Reformation united the Jedi Order with the Galactic Republic and reshaped the tenets of the Jedi Code in an effort to overcome past shortcomings. A measure of this change was the rewriting of the Jedi Code. There is no emotion, there is peace. There is no ignorance, there is knowledge. There is no passion, there is serenity. There is no chaos, there is harmony. There is no death, there is the Force, Obi-Wan recites. This is the code as it stands today, where once we held the code to be. Emotion, yet peace. Ignorance, yet knowledge. Passion, yet serenity. Chaos, yet harmony. Death, yet the Force. Obi-Wan thinks the old code suits him better, as it suits his master, because it allows him acknowledgement that he does feel, that he is ignorant, that there is passion, and that chaos is not ruin, but he would never dare say that aloud, not to this august body. As it was, he doubted very much that they'd like him after today. This shifted ideal also included the restriction on attachments. Jedi were no longer allowed to marry, to have children, to maintain a household outside the Order. Obi-Wan hadn't even known that they had been able to once. Hadn't known that Jedi weren't always so secular, so insular. The story of Nomi Sunrider, a Grand Master of the Order, and the one to defeat the Sith Lord Ulic Qel-Droma was still told in the creche. Discovering the stories of Andor Sunrider, her husband, and Vima Sunrider, her daughter, had shaken him to the core. In the centuries following, the Order forbid a master from taking more than one apprentice at a time, Obi-Wan says, rushing through what should have been far more information as his nerves frayed and his comms started to elude him once more. The Order added a restriction on the age of Padawans to begin their training. Then a restriction on the age of those taken in as initiates. When midichlorians were discovered and methods of testing midichlorian counts became commonly accessible, the Order added a minimum requirement of midichlorian concentration to those it was allowed to accept into the creche. Date slipped his mind, explanations of the Order's recorded reasonings drying up in his throat. Masters, at the time of the last great Sith War, there were nearly 3 million Jedi and over 200 temples. Today, there are slightly less than 14,000 of us and barely 17 active temples if one counts Ilum. There are 9,742 Jedi here at Coruscant, 2,100 at the temple on Corellia, roughly 700 at Jedha, and 1,600 or so Jedi scattered between the other 14 temples. There are too many numbers to see it clearly, so Obi-Wan will state it plainly, a blunt and brutal truth. And dropping, he adds, Masters, the Jedi Order is dying.